Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank you all for joining us this evening. Before we move into our regular board meeting, Huntersville experienced such great loss over the last several days. And we wanted to take a moment to remember a former mayor who gave so much to our community. She served our community for more than 2 decades. And she gave so much of her time and her talent and for herself. And in respect and in honor of that, we also have invited our former mayors, and I would like to take a moment to recognize each of them. Former Mayor Sarah McCauley, former Mayor Kim Phillips, former Mayor Drew Saunders, and former Mayor John Anarella. Thank all of you for being here this evening, but also we would like to thank Mayor Alexander from Salisbury for coming to join us this evening and taking a moment and honor former Mayor Jill Swain. Jill was meant a lot to a lot of people in our community, and we want to take that moment and reflect on all of her years of service. So thank you, and I would like to also say that Mayor Alexander is also the League of Municipalities, I guess now former president, past president, just finished up her role there. If we can just take a moment, we'll roll that a memorial video, and then we will have a moment of silence. Now, if you will join me, please, in a moment of silence. Amen. At this time, if anyone would like to, I'll give you a graceful exit if you would like to leave. And of course, you're all we'd love to keep you here and stay with us through the meeting, but if you can't, we completely understand. Thank you so much. Now, for the rest of us, if you wouldn't mind, please standing and joining us in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, we will now move to staff questions. Does anyone have questions for staff this evening? Seeing none, we will now move into our public comments, requests, and presentations. And we are going to start with our presentation of Small Business Week Proclamation. And so, Mr. Russell, would you join me along with Commissioner Kovacs? Thank you. It is a great week in Huntersville when we can celebrate our small businesses. Whereas the town of Huntersville, North Carolina recognizes and values the dedication and entrepreneurial spirit of small businesses that keep the state and American economy growing stronger. And whereas there are over 930,000 small businesses with employees in North Carolina alone, representing a majority of the total number of businesses with employees in this state. And whereas the income of North Carolina's small business owners total over $20 billion, and these businesses employ 1.7 million North Carolinians, or 45.3% of the state's non-farm private workforce. And whereas there are over 28,500 small businesses with employees right here in Mecklenburg County, and over 69,000 sole proprietors, representing a majority of the total number of business in the county. And whereas it is the collaborative mission of the town, working with the Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce, the Lake Norman Economic Development Corporation, Visit Lake Norman, and the Small Business Administration to help our businesses grow and create new jobs in the community and the Lake Norman region by providing exemplary workforce training, financial assistance programs, and research and technical assistance. And whereas the town of Huntersville appreciates the support of our small business community by the Chamber of Commerce, Central Piedmont Community College, Small Business Technology Development Center, and our SCORE volunteers. And whereas during the week of May the 2nd through May the 7th, the Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce is celebrating Small Business Week. Now, therefore, I, Melinda Bales, Mayor of the Town of Huntersville, do hereby proclaim May the 2nd through the 7th of 2022 as Small Business Week in Huntersville and urge all citizens to acknowledge and celebrate the achievements made by small businesses both locally and nationally, and to further support your local businesses by shopping and buying local. Well done. I'd like to present that to you, and we're going to
Somebody back here.
imagine who that could possibly be. Thank you. You know, our small businesses really are the backbone of our community. So please, as you get out throughout the rest of this week, hop into that shop, buy local, and tell them how much you appreciate that they're there. Because that is what makes our community such a great space. Now, next, we have a presentation on the North Corridor Bus Rapid Transit Study. Welcome. And I am sorry we didn't get a chance to chat before the meeting.
No, it's good to actually see your face in person.
Same.
It's been virtual for months now.
Yes.
So I'm going to adjust this. Hopefully you can hear my voice and I'm projecting.
Yes.
My name is Bruce Jones and I'm with Charlotte Area Transit System, and I'm here with my colleague Brian O'Donnelly. So tonight we're going to give you an update or a brief overview of two initiatives that we're working on, and specifically hone in on the recommendations for the town of Huntersville. So to start with the Envision bus priority study, so we've been working on a system redesign of our entire network through an initiative known as Envision My Ride. And so with Envision My Ride, we're making improvements in three key areas. So we're improving overall time for customers by offering more frequent service, and the main goal is increasing the number of routes that operate every 15 minutes or better. In addition to that, moving to a more consistent schedule, and then also taking advantage of what's known as priority bus treatments, or the ability to help speed up and make service more reliable on key bus routes. In addition to that, we're also enhancing experience through bus stop and amenity improvements, and then also what's known as mobility hubs. And I'll get to some examples of what that looks like moving forward. And then in addition to that, increased crosstown connections, and then also first last mile solutions known as microtransit. So to start, some of the recommendations through Envision My Ride, as I mentioned, is improving the number of routes that operate every 15 minutes or better. And so with that, we have two key routes that we're taking advantage of through the I-77 toll lanes known as the Metro Rapid routes. And so those provide express peak hour service to and from uptown Charlotte. And so we have two routes in particular that serve Huntersville, the 48X North Cross, and then the 63X, the Huntersville Gateway Station. And so both of these routes are going to have 15-minute service during the peak period, or better service, I should say, moving forward with Envision My Ride. And then as you can see here on the map, all of these routes that you see color-coded in red represent the all-day high-frequency network, and then the gold lines represent the peak hour express high-frequency network. In addition to that, I mentioned bus stop improvements. And so one of the main things that we're working to do is upgrade all of our stops so that they meet accessibility guidelines, I should say. And so what that means is that we want to make sure that we have at minimum sidewalk and infrastructure in place so that we can pick up passengers, whether they're walking to a bus stop or traveling by wheelchair or any other means of mobility. In addition to that, we're rolling out what we're calling mobility hubs. And think of those essentially as a way for you to connect not only to transit, but other forms of mobility as well. Whether that's rideshare programs, Lyft or Uber, whether that's bike or pedestrian connections, scooter connections, and so on. And so with that, it includes existing park and rides, and then also retrofitting some of those park and rides so that we can enhance some of the additional amenities as well. It also includes the future North Quarter BRT stations, which Brian will touch on, and then also some of the other key areas throughout Huntersville, including Brighton Town Center. And so this chart just gives you an example of what the different amenity types by each stop look like. And so starting with the standard stop, as I mentioned, so we have at minimum that accessible boarding area, and then as we begin to improve upon the stop, we add additional amenities. So we have benches at the type B for standard stop, and then going all the way up to shelters. What you see here on the right-hand side of the chart are the mobility hubs that I mentioned. So those enhanced transit stops that help connect individuals to those modes of transportation. And so with that, we have 3 different tiers. So starting at the lowest tier, we have, think of it more so as an enhanced bus stop with amenities such as shelters and dedicated space for you to store scooters or bicycles. And then moving all the way up to level 3, which is similar to what we have at our park and ride locations. So think of Huntersville Gateway, if you're familiar with that, or North Cross Park and Ride for an example of that. In addition to that, we're also thinking of a more holistic way to roll out amenities. So currently, we roll out amenities primarily based on ridership. So typically, if a stop has 25 or more boardings, it qualifies for a shelter. What we're trying to do is think of other metrics and develop a scoring system so that we can better roll out amenities at a greater scale. And so we'll be looking at additional things, including wait time. So if you have a longer wait time at the bus, that clearly means that you may need a shelter more than someone that has more frequent service. So looking at how we can roll out additional amenities based on that, looking at equity population and population served as well, and then also looking at destination types, so human service facilities, libraries, senior facilities, things of that sort. And then last but not least, looking at how we can provide that first last mile connection through microtransit. And so think of that essentially as using a smaller transit vehicle in the style of Lyft or Uber. And so how it works is you would have, specifically if you request through your smartphone, similar to what you do with the rideshare program, it would provide you with transit service at a designated spot, and it operates within zones or boundaries. And so we've done some initial work to identify the zones. Before I get to that, just want to go into some use cases for how we can use microtransit. So you can think of it as a neighborhood circulator service. So in some of those areas where we have maybe not good roadway access to the main corridors, looking at how we can enhance that through microtransit. In addition to that, providing that key first last mile connection. So making sure that we're providing connections in areas where we don't currently have traditional fixed route or bus service. So making those important connections to and from those mobility hubs that I mentioned. And then last but not least, looking at how we can potentially replace service such as the Village Rider service. And so if you're familiar with the Village Rider service, we currently provide that. It currently operates every 60 minutes, so it's not the most convenient service. And so looking at how we can transition that to a more convenient service through microtransit will be the next step of this effort. And so these are the initial zones that we've identified. And as you can see, each zone connects to those future mobility hubs that I mentioned. So the Huntersville Gateway Park and Ride, the North Cross Park and Ride, the future Hambright Park and Ride, and then also that mobility center at Brighton Town Center that I mentioned. And so I mentioned too that we have those existing facilities. We of course would upgrade those with enhanced technology so that we can offer infrastructure for, say, charging, electric vehicles, additional shelters, wayfinding, and additional amenities as well to help improve that connection for individuals. In addition to that, they'll also connect to the future North Quarter BRT stations that Brian will walk you through. One thing that we are going to continue to do as well is coordinate with the town of Huntersville, including the mobility plan that we have as an ongoing initiative as well to make sure that we're coordinating and tying into that plan. And so just to give you a timeline of that, and I know I rushed through that, I'm sorry, we're crunched on time, but we're taking this for plan adoption in May of this year. And so that includes all the recommendations that I mentioned. So the high frequency network, the network recommendations, including crosstown service, microtransit zones, and then also that bus stop improvement plan. In addition to that, the next step will be to develop that microtransit operational strategy. So we've identified the initial zones. What we want to do now is identify how can we best operate within those zones so that we can provide convenient and frequent service for individuals. So that process will involve, of course, dedicated public outreach, We'll work with the community, specifically as it relates to replacing the village rider service. So we want to make sure that we have community input throughout that process to help us develop the best operational plan for that. And then last but certainly not least, developing that implementation strategies for how we roll out all of these improvements holistically within the next few years. And so with that, I'll transition it to Brian, who'll give you an overview of the North Quarter BRT program.
Thanks, Bruce. So when the Blue Line extension was opening up, we decided at CATS to take a look at all the other corridors in our plan. The plan was a little older, so we decided to do a refresh. It was called the Link System Update, and that was adopted in February of 2019. And for the North Quarter, we recommended 3 different areas here. Bruce talked a lot about all the short-term things that we're looking at as far as bus stop amenities and all the different things that are going on with Envision My Ride. But we added this midterm solution where, because the hot lanes are now open and we have these express buses that can utilize those lanes, that we looked at implementing a bus rapid transit service to utilize those lanes and have all-day service, including nights and weekends, add additional park and ride lots, take advantage of those express lane direct connections, and then long-term, of course, there still is the Lynx Red Line that would utilize the rail out here. We're still working with Norfolk Southern. We continue that dialogue to find a solution to have the rail as a rapid transit corridor as well. The Metro Rapid BRT officially opened in February of 2020 when we opened up the Cornelius Park and Ride lot. So this was the ceremony, and so each of our park and ride lots now have a direct service into Center City, Charlotte. And if you can see the time frame, it was February of 2020, so the next month the pandemic hit, so we really didn't get a great chance to roll it out, but we are seeing the express service grow every month now that things are continuing to get back to a new normal. So the overview of the project, we basically are looking at the existing park and rides, which there's the 2 in Huntersville, Huntersville North Cross and Gateway. And then we're also looking at expanding and adding additional park and rides, one up in Mooresville, one in Davidson, and then one at Hambright. And then, I talked about this direct connections. There's 2 direct connects that they're in green on the map here at Hambright and at Lakeview, where you can drop down right into the hot lanes without having to get on at a general purpose interchange and then work your way over. And we're looking at ways to add additional ones. More relevant for here would be at North Cross and Gateway. There's the possibility of figuring out how to do direct connects for buses. And then finally, what you see in brown at the bottom is once you get to Center City, Charlotte, and you get off of those hot lanes and you enter the Charlotte streets, is we want to prioritize the bus to make sure you get to your destination as fast as possible. So we're looking at which streets we'd utilize and sort of the prioritization of the signals and the amenities that we need down there, so that you're not 5 minutes from your destination or a mile from your destination, but it takes 15 more minutes to maneuver through uptown Charlotte traffic. The proposed operating plan, like I mentioned, each of our stops can have their own individual direct service into Charlotte, and that'll be layered with service that can hit multiple ones, potentially all of them, but we can see which stops are more correlated with each other. We see this around the country that they can have a whole series of different services. But this is kind of an advantage over your traditional rapid transit service that has to stop at each station. You can get on at Huntersville North Cross and go straight into uptown Charlotte without having to stop at the ones along the way. So some of the things we looked at, we did a parking analysis, just making sure that we sized the parking rides correctly. And at Sanford Road, this is the existing North Cross park and ride lot in red. And it currently has 326 spaces, and we see a future need at some point to be up up to 430 spaces. We think we'll be good for a while there, but we've done some thinking about how we can expand it since there is some challenges there with development kind of surrounding the site. And we looked at having what I said of the direct connects coming up from the center lanes. And if you see in the highway in Huntersville particularly, there's a large swath of median, and we looked at ways that we can bring the bus out of the median and over to the park and ride lot to serve it more directly, so that the buses don't have to, work their way down to the North Cross light and then the Sanford interchange, and then get into the regular general purpose lanes before they have to get, I think, below exit 23 before they finally can reach one of those access points to enter the hot lanes. And then we also looked at other network connections. For instance, North Cross Drive ends at the park and ride lot, and there's some great potential for that to continue on up to Westmoreland so that people can access the lot more easily. Down at exit 23, the existing park and ride lot there, it started with 200 spaces, and we actually expanded it once already, and it's 311 spaces. Before the pandemic, that was kind of hitting capacity on certain days. So the future needs showed that could use up to 640 spaces. So here we are looking at ways to expand it. You can see to the north of the red box is some land that we've kind of looking at as potential for additional parking in the future. And again, we looked at ways that you could bring the buses out of the hot lanes and access the park and ride lot. You can see the median is starting to narrow here, so it's a little more challenging to get out here. And in other parts of the system, there is no median. So for instance, up in Cornelius, it just kind of tightens. So we don't have the possibilities there. And the other thing we've been working on closely with the county is that there's the Torrance Creek Greenway is being expanded. So it already exists to the west, and it's going to come in and go under the highway, and it's going to connect up to that existing park and ride. We're actually tying it right in. We're going to have to give up one space, but we think that's a benefit, because now everyone from the west side of the highway have that option of either walking or biking to that park and ride lot, where currently you have people on the Rosedale side having to maneuver through the interchange to get up there. So that's going to be a benefit as well. Finally, was mentioned before, we are going to build a Hambright park and ride lot. So Hambright has that direct connect. You can see it on the top corner there, how the buses can drop straight in. Not only buses, but any hot lane users can drop straight into those center lanes. And this land was owned by the state of North Carolina, and that's been given over to CATS, where we're building a 500-space parking facility with 6 bus bays, and talking about some of those mobility hub amenities that Bruce talked about. We're going to include that in this from the start, and we're going to have a driver comfort station, and again, that direct connect access. This is fully funded, and it's in the design process right now. It's going through the environmental review, and we should be starting construction here shortly. And so with that, that's our big next step that's going on now, and that concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much. If you don't mind some questions, I would like to open it up to the board if you have any. Commissioner Kidwell.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Is there any future thought, or have you guys already started looking at using the 485 loop for BRT as development happens out towards the airport and things like that for businesses?
We have. We branded this Metro Rapid, and it's this kind of the Metro Rapid North, but we see this as being utilized in other areas. It makes perfect sense here because those hot lanes exist, so we don't have to pay for any infrastructure to run our buses in those lanes. Down in 485 South, they're doing something similar, so we're looking there. But and the state is looking at other highways as well, and so we plan to utilize it wherever it makes sense. Well, for your question with 485 and getting to the airport or the university area, we might not have access to our own exclusive lanes that are managed, but we definitely want to look at those routes, and definitely those are two strong economic centers that would connect the north to the university area or the airport.
Any other questions, board members? Commissioner Munger.
Sure. So I have a lot of them. They're all going to end with when. Where have you identified areas where there's actually going to be bus shelters put in, and how many of them, and where are they located?
So we're still testing out the scoring system that I mentioned. So once we get that officially adopted by our board, we'll begin that process as far as identifying shelter locations. So we do have money within next year's budget to start that process. Of course, we'll continue to have dialogue with you all before we make that decision, but just give you an update on that.
Because we've been asking for bus shelters for quite some time, and love to see just one and say, look, we actually have
One
one.
of the challenges too is that we want to make sure that we have the existing infrastructure that I mentioned, so those sidewalk connections. So definitely we want to coordinate with your Department of Public Works whenever we make those improvements, just to make sure we have that in place as well.
Okay. One of the other questions, it looks like we have pretty good service during peak hours. Non-peak hours seems to be an area of concern, and one of the things I see is all paths point to get to Uptown Charlotte. I'd love it if we were able to get around Huntersville and have more options there. Is there plans for that?
Yeah, so I think that's where that microtransit piece comes into play. So we still have to design the service, rather. So once we figure out what that looks like, that should provide a better all-day service for individuals. Whether that's just having a straight feeder route that serves maybe Statesville, and then we connect to the microtransit or mobility hubs through microtransit, I should say. That's something that we could explore as well. I think that we have to continue to have that dialogue, though, before we make that decision. But definitely long-term vision is to improve service overall.
Right. I would beg for you to think east-west, not just north-south. And then medium term, there was a slide on medium term. When?
Or North Quarter BRT?
Yeah, I believe that was.
So, yeah, we just did the planning study, and to get back to your question before, as far as that our express service is, for the most part, peak only. And one of the purposes of doing this Metro Rapid BRT is to have full all-day weekend, the way other rapid transit services that we provide go. So right now there's some dialogue about funding sources and that, and so this would be tied to additional funding at CATS, because this is a part of the rapid transit system. So it involves a new funding source.
So is the new funding source the possible bond referendum next year?
That's one possible funding source, yeah.
Okay. And yeah, that'll cover it. Thank you.
Commissioner Partee?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. Bruce, question on the micro transit. Do you provide a program where the visual impaired and seniors with disability have access to the transportation, and how will they contact, or how will they get in contact with that?
Yeah, so we still have to determine that once we develop that operational strategy, but essentially it will be similar to what we have with paratransit services. So typically for individuals, they're able to either call our customer service line. We have other means as well for them to contact. I think long-term, once we develop that operational strategy, the goal is to incorporate most of that within our app. So determining accessibility with that will be a long-term goal as well. But we'll still have other means as far as reaching individuals that don't have access to smartphones or other technology.
Thank you.
Commissioner Phillips?
So when you guys are planning to put stops at places, do you take in consideration, like, places that take vouchers or have affordable housing components?
Yeah, so that's one of the key things. So we always look at if it's a senior facility, if it's a major trip generator, if it's affordable housing, we try to coordinate with that as much as possible. I think one of the things that we're going to try to do moving forward, a better job at least, so with the city of Charlotte, we work closely with developers with the land development process. So we request amenities and bus stop improvements through that. we definitely want to see if we can coordinate with the towns of Huntersville, I should say. I don't know why I keep screwing that name up. Huntersville. So we want to make sure that we coordinate with you all as far as making improvements long-term with that too. So if we can definitely get involved with that, then that'll be a big help.
That would be great because like a few months ago, we passed affordable senior in there at Mount Holly and Beatty's Ford. And that's kind of like a desert for transportation. And I've working and volunteering in this stuff for so long, it's a conversation that's had often is, we would love to come to Huntersville, but, and it always comes back to having affordable transportation for people. Depending upon where you are in Huntersville, depends on if affordable things are part of it, because they're like, well, people can't afford to travel. Another issue I've ran into is we have Ada Jenkins here, and an issue is we pass affordable housing in areas, and then if you have to take the bus, it can take you over an hour one single way to get to services. It can be even worse if you're trying to get to downtown Charlotte to get to services. I know somebody, it took them 3 hours to get to crisis assistance downtown one day because of bus issues. So I appreciate that you guys are going to take that into consideration, and to make that easier for us to work collectively, would you like us to start sending you guys updates like, hey, we have this on the docket that's going to have affordable, or we've passed this that's affordable?
Yeah, I think definitely if there's any future development, whether it's a senior facility, as I mentioned, if it's affordable housing, anything that would support transit, I think if we can be involved in that conversation, that'll definitely help us when it comes to planning for service in that area, so.
Well, that just made my day. Thank you.
And I will tell you that Katz has been hearing that from me for several months now. And I know that you are working with our staff as well as you continue to develop this out. So I'm glad to know that my board's echoing the same things that I'm saying when we meet. Commissioner Kidwell?
Yes. 2 follow-up questions. One's with BRT. Where are the buses originating from? Are they coming from Charlotte, going all the way to Statesville, and then working their way back down? Or are they, because I'm more concerned about, are they filling up by the time they get to Huntersville from Statesville, or vice versa?
So like I show with the operation plan, there's going to be several different options. So if you're trying to get on at North Cross, there might only be 2 stops in the whole service, one at North Cross and one in Uptown Charlotte. But then there's other ones that will cover the whole network. And you're concerned about like buses filling up and stuff like that. We monitor that. If they are filling up, that's a good problem to have. And usually the way to fix that is to add service. So if you're at 15-minute headways and it's just they're filling up, you might go to 10-minute headways, and that spreads the load among the additional buses.
And the other question I had was, when everything's heading down to the city, a lot of people work downtown or uptown, whatever you enjoy calling it. But yeah, I've talked to people where they get dropped off, but they're still walking 4, 5, 6, 7 blocks to get to their job. Is there plans to set up a line to help them get to closer to their employment?
Yeah, I mean, so that's the whole point of building a network. So we have, the Gold Line, which is running, that's the streetcar that's running along Trade Street. So, potentially you can get on that to reach your final destination. We have the Blue Line now, that's 19 miles. And we have, additional services. We're trying to build out the network throughout the whole county so that, that if you're 7 blocks away, there's another service to take you there. But we also have to kind of rethink transit in general with the pandemic. Everyone was going into work at 8 in the morning and coming back home at 5. And now, because of the flexibility people have, we're seeing, instead of these 2 peaks, we're seeing a much more leveling out, which to us shows that we need to, kind of look at that service being all day. You mentioned just peak times, but now we have to really think about providing that in more hours.
And Commissioner Boone?
Thank you. A couple questions. I guess I will start with Brian first. Are you doing away with the village rider or cutting back on that?
So we have to determine that once we look at future steps with the microtransit zones. I think it would be sort of a hybrid. So we may still have a fixed route that maybe serves Statesville, but then we might convert the other routes to more of a microtransit on demand. And so the goal will be to connect individuals to that fixed route and then also those mobility hubs and parking
Are
rides.
you going to continue with the 77 Express bus?
That would continue. It would transition to the North Quarter BRT that he walked through, but it would continue in some form.
And of the stops that are in Huntersville, do you know what how they rank with the other stops in your system?
In terms of ridership,
Yes.
not off the top of my head. We can get that to you, though.
That'd be very interesting to me. And I think what I've heard here is it's not about getting from Huntersville to Charlotte. It's east-west for us. And speaking with the principal at Hopewell High School, she has a problem of getting students from school over to the junior college in Huntersville. And there's just not a way to get that. And I'm hoping that this microtransit will solve that. Have any idea what the cost might be on that?
Haven't delved deep into it to determine. I think it just depends on the type of operation. So if we operate it within our own existing fleet and operators, or if we contract it out to a different service, it all depends on that. But we'll have to come back to you with that once we have a more understanding, or a better understanding at least, on what type of service we'll provide.
Gentlemen, thank you for your presentation. Very good. Thank you.
So I do have one last question for you. I think we've talked a lot about microtransit, and I think that you hear from all of us that we believe that that's important in our communities, not only to be able to get to Charlotte in a timely fashion at any time of day, but also to be able to go north, south, east, west, throughout the day on a regular basis, especially as our community continues to grow a strong senior population. In addition to that, I'm sure that there are a lot of kids today who do not drive, who do not have a driver's license, but they may want to work. So to be able to get them from their neighborhoods to that place of employment is very important. My question for you, when you talked about the new Hambright location, you had one area, it said driver comfort station. And I'm curious to know if there will be any additional amenities with that, a coffee shop, anything of that nature, so that when people are transitioning from one bus to another, that they've got that ability to grab a snack or a coffee, et cetera, in the mornings or in the evenings.
We look at opportunities like that. It's called joint development because, CATS isn't in the business of creating the coffee
Correct.
shop and running it. So we're looking for partners. The beauty at Hambright, I mentioned the state owned that. They actually owned 20 acres that they've turned over. So we only needed 10 to do this awfully large park and ride lot. So there's a lot of space available. So we're looking at those opportunities. Certain things are perfect for that, like you say, coffee shops, dry cleaning, little convenience stores and that are attached to them. We are looking at that and trying to find those partners.
Perfect. Thank you so very much. And thank you for coming. It was a great presentation. Yes, sir?
Thank you.
We will now move to public comments. Mr. David Walter, thank you for coming. If you wouldn't mind coming up to the microphone. And when you get there, please state your name and your address for the record, and then you have 3 minutes.
It's nice to get that off. Yes. I usually talk loud enough that people don't need a microphone. My name is David Walter. I live at 9004 Park Grove Street. That's the Winfield Forest development in Huntersville. I'm here tonight to request that you make a modification to one of your policies. In conversation with Tracy Hauk, who may be here, I see her name, and a guy named Michael, whose last name I don't know, but from the Park District, there's a problem. There's been a group loosely called Friday Bridge that has made use of the Arts and Cultural Center, I'm told, for 15 years. I've been involved for over 10, and for at least the last 5, I've been the director. Not really in charge, but I do the scoring and such. At the beginning of the COVID pandemic, we stopped playing. Like everything else in society, we shut down. A year ago, we resumed play. Not quite a year ago. It was the end of May. I'm sorry, I got out of my order. The group that plays, because this is a Friday morning, we're all retired, but we're more than that. I think I'm the youngest, but if I'm not the youngest player, I'm second. And I'm going to be 75 in August, okay? We have a group of elderly people playing bridge 3 feet apart for 3 hours, exchanging the cards. This is not an environment where if you're not vaccinated, well, the rule is if you're not vaccinated, you can't play, okay? This is an at-risk population, and I can't stress that enough. We resumed play, and I'll pass this out. There's one for everybody. We resumed play after the Centers for Disease Control relaxed the rules and said, you're allowed to have a group of people in a closed environment like this room if, and only if, everyone is vaccinated, okay? That is a federal reg. So what I'm asking is a modification of the policy, and a policy is a guidance, but a modification of that policy that says, in effect, and I'm sure the attorney can come up with better wording, but in effect, the policy is whatever you said it was, unless there is a conflict with a regulation from a higher level of government. Okay? You're not going to go against state laws. You're not going to go against federal laws. And virtually the CDC, as we have all seen the news, it's not a rule, it's a regulation. Okay? Now, the problem came about because, actually, and she's here tonight, Lynn Drake approached me and asked if she could play. And I know her opinion on vaccines because she's told me. And I said, Lynn, we'd love to have you play, but you got to be vaccinated. She then came to you people and to the Park District. As you can see, she's here tonight, and she is not wearing a mask. So she really doesn't care if she's a risk to anybody else. And your meeting is actually in violation of the CDC regs because there's obviously at least one person in the room who's not vaccinated. Okay, I got off on a second topic.
You've already
All I
gone
care
over
about
your 3 minutes, so.
All I really care about is I'm requesting a modification to the policy that takes account of the fact that there may be other conditions that are relevant in its application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Lynn Drake, if you wouldn't mind coming to the podium and state your name and address for the record, please.
I don't know, I'm not used to these, so help me. Lynn Drake, 8925 Wedgewood Drive. And I must begin by saying that I want to thank you all, because the Parks and Recreation, I have played bridge 25 years it has been here, and I don't know whether most people know. If I had longer, I would spend lots of time trying to sell bridge to you all, because it is well known that it is one of the top ways to prevent dementia. So I played at 3 facilities, this one 20 out of 25 years, the Mallard Creek over 10 years, and another one that's close to town. So I greatly appreciate you. And I also appreciate the way you started the meeting, acknowledging people who are leaders. That's what we need to do. And I don't appreciate Mr. Walters saying that I reached out to him. We only reached by email. I am not a pariah, and I really don't want to start that way, except I cannot take vaccines. I don't take medicine. I can't. Doctors stopped me when I was a kid. It's my family, and I should have a medical exemption. But what we really need to go to is the Parks and Recreation. Over the 20 years that I've been playing with them, I was looking for places for groups to play bridge twice. And this is a high-level bridge. So you're not talking a lot, you're playing. And it was made clear to me that it was very fair rules that the Parks and Recreation had, that groups were not allowed to exclude anyone who showed up to play, even if they knew nothing about bridge. And groups also could not change rules or make exclusions. And I really do think that works, because you can get into a lot of legal technicalities if you try to rule that I'm a pariah, that I'm contagious. I am not. I'm one of the healthiest people you'll ever meet. I take no medication. I have no ill effects. I climb ladders. It's not accurate. So what I'm trying to say is, what you have now with the Parks and Recreation works. Do you want to open a can of worms and legal? And I would get involved. I'm sorry, because I love the way it has worked for 20 years, and I've been able to play bridge anywhere from 2 to 4 times a week. It's kept my brain good, and the rules were very fair. Why should people be turned away? If they can't play bridge, you try to explain to them that you really might not like it or you might not stay. But I know at the Mallard Creek Center, they have allowed people to stay and tried to work with them. It has not been done at the other 2 centers. I know that for a fact. As far as changing the rules, the other part that the Parks and Recreation has, and it's very fair, is if you pay to play, which I hate that this has come up, then you can set rules. But I do question, again, from a legal standpoint, can you mandate, for the reasons Mr. Walter is saying, that I can't play, people who are unvaxxed can't play because they're contagious? That's a legal issue. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person who is signed up to speak is Miss Betty Caldwell. Good evening, Miss Caldwell. Thanks for joining us. If you wouldn't mind stating your name and your address for the record, please.
Betty Jane B.J. Caldwell, address 14521 New Haven Drive, Huntersville. The area known as Pottstown was intertwined with descendants of former slaves scattered by the ending of the Civil War. They came from many cities looking to settle and make a home for their families. One man and his wife bought property a short distance from the town's Negro lodging area called the Quarters. This farmer made a name for himself as a brick mason, the best in the area. So good was he at his craft that the town's governing body named where he lived Pottstown. That was 113 years ago in 1909. Today in 2022, it is a different story, where the order of the day is move any out there and move others in. To all people listening, get your pens ready to write another story of Pottstown, detailing its possible demise due to more gentrification. Depending upon what happens at the next board meeting, an epitaph documenting its legacy could be written down in history as a has-been town designated for descendants of the enslaved. Now, some may wonder, is this a bad thing? Maybe yes, maybe no. There are those who hold on to nostalgia for that time period when humans could be bound in the legal American chattel slave system. This existed from the 1600s until 1863, when President Lincoln wrote the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed the enslaved. The 4 known streets leading from a rural community to an urban one is an issue. Pottstown is partially gentrified and is heading for a full gentrification showdown at Holbrook Road, David Street, Delwood Drive, and Central Avenue, where the 2 worlds collide, rural versus urban. And it will display the vast differences in Pottstown streets and those in Vallejo Village. street infrastructure with sidewalks, upscale homes to live, income disparities, access to sea mud, water, and sewage, and access to local services are at the forefront of the lives of Pottstown residents. This invasion by a developer whose desire was to drive out the average black family and move in more affluent ones has made him wealthy. Now, there's nothing wrong with wealth. This would not be such a bad thing if there were a brick mason with affordable land to sell to local families who cannot afford to pay over $1,000 a month for apartment rent, or even more for 300 to 400,000 proposed homes being built within the heart of the Pottstown in Vallejo Village. Where can we go and what can we do? To Vermilion? I don't think so. If and when Vallejo Village is built as envisioned, whatever happens to our beloved Pottstown is what happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Caldwell. Are there any agenda changes? Commissioner Phillips?
Yes, ma'am. We would like to make a motion, or me, I don't know, my brain's fried, to move 10A to 10D. 10A is presentation of manager's recommended budget for FY '23.
All right. Are there any other changes to the agenda this evening?
Can I clarify on one thing?
Yes?
That was 9A to 9?
No?
No, it's 10. Remember, we moved consent to the beginning, so it changed.
Oh, yeah, I'm looking at his. You're right. My apologies. I'll second that motion if we need it.
So there is a motion, there is a second. Any discussion on this change? Seeing none. Motion to approve. That is 6-0. Now, I'd like to entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
Motion to adopt agenda as amended.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that is a 6-0 vote. We will now move to the consent agenda. The chair will entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, the consent agenda passes. We will now move to public hearing. Item 9A, conduct a public hearing on petition TA 22-05, a request by Huntersville Town Board to amend the subdivision and zoning ordinance.
Thank you.
Mr. Semino?
Enter the staff report into the record, and I'm going to kind of go through this methodically to just get everybody up to speed what's happening. Last town board and the current town board had set a goal to reduce the number of quasi-judicial decisions. And so in 2021, we amended the subdivision ordinance so that minor amendments to subdivisions could be approved by staff and not have to come to the town board. So that was one way. We are also processing a request to amend the ordinance to remove minor solar panels facing streets to have to get a special use permit. That went to the planning board last month, and you'll be getting that in a couple weeks. And the third thing that we were looking at is consideration changing the subdivision approval from a quasi-judicial process, and that's what we're at here tonight about. Okay, so to do this, it's going to require amendment to the subdivision ordinance and related sections of the zoning ordinance. So subdivision and zoning ordinance have to be amended. While we're in there, we're also making some minor corrections, state statute citations to the subdivision and zoning ordinance that are not substantive in nature, but since we're in there, we're making those adjustments as well. Everything is documented in your agenda packet, and online is the complete subdivision ordinance and changes to the zoning ordinance, and it's all indicated what's being crossed out and what's being added. Just again, to make sure everybody's on the same page here, this is going to be an amendment to just subdivisions and not anything to have to do with rezoning. So what you're looking at here is a town zoning map with different colors representing different zoning districts. and they all have different densities and open space. And as long as a developer walks in the door and develops property in accordance with that established standards, this is what will be affected. Rezonings will not be affected by this change. So to start off with, want to say, this is an excerpt from the UNC School of Government, where they say, basically, there's two different ways to approve subdivisions in North Carolina. One is it's an administrative decision, and that's if you have very clear objective standards, lot size, open space, road specifications. So just do you meet it or do you not, okay? So that is an administrative. However, the statutes also have authority that you could make subdivisions a quasi-judicial decision, which is what happened in Huntersville. And so in addition to those clear and objective standards, which we have, the ordinance may require the applicant meet certain standards requiring, and I highlight standards requiring judgment and discretion similar to special use permits about is it in harmony with the area, will it harm the neighborhood property value? So those are the kind of things that are subjective. And so if you have those subjective standards, such as Huntersville, then you have to do the quasi-judicial. So what does that mean then? Well, in the statutes, it goes on to say that if you have subdivision plats that are administrative, then you may, as a town board, assign that to a staff person or a committee. But it also says if the subdivision is a quasi-judicial decision, that is, there's some subjective standards, it shall be assigned to the governing board or other board. So just so we're clear on where we sit with comparison to people across the state or communities across the state, this is a 2018 survey from the School of Government where they talked to 275 jurisdictions, sent out a survey, and asked how many have objective standards, it's administrative, how many are subjective. So the percent of districts that are percent of jurisdictions that had only objective standards, 72% of those 275 communities have objective standards. And then they asked about discretionary standards, and the number there is 28% of the jurisdictions. So we're in that 28%, okay? So just wanted to get that out there. So steps for getting a subdivision approved. We have 3 steps in Huntersville. One's called a sketch plan. That's general in nature. Gives us the road layout, the concept plan, how many lots. In terms of the steps, it goes to the planning board first for a recommendation, then it goes to the town board for a quasi-judicial decision. That's highlighted because that's the section we're changing. After that sketch plan is approved, then there is a preliminary plan that comes in, and that's full engineering drawings, and it's coordinated with all the different agencies, utilities, state, DOT, and that's a staff approval if it complies with the subdivision sketch plan. And then finally, after all the infrastructure is installed, the streets, the water, the sewer, the storm drainage, then the last step is the final plat, and that's where they do a meets and bounds description, and then they record that in register of deeds, and then the lots start getting sold, and you start building houses, okay? So we're changing that first one, the subdivision sketch plan. So our current process is as follows. We have some subjective standards, so therefore we follow the quasi-judicial process. So we get a subdivision application that comes in. The developer holds what we call a neighborhood meeting. That's to give the neighbors an idea of what's coming down the pike. It goes to the planning board for a recommendation, and then ultimately to the town board for a decision in a quasi-judicial hearing, meaning simply that it's under sworn testimony and you can only hear the facts of the case. The proposal is we're going to change the standards so that they're all objective standards now, and that would then follow an administrative process. It will still have a subdivision sketch plan approval. We still do recommend a neighborhood meeting because this is a good opportunity for the community to understand what's happening around them, so we do recommend it. It's not necessary, but we do recommend it. It would not go to the planning board, and the recommendation from staff is that the decision is made by staff, and that's following the North Carolina School of Government that recommends a staff approval since there's no room for policy choices or discretion. So that's their recommendation. So that's how we've drafted that. Okay. Just an example of what we're talking about. So what you're seeing in red is new language, and what you're seeing in black is the existing language. And if you go to 6.20 of the ordinance, the subdivision ordinance today, it's general requirements. So now we can't, and some of our general requirements are subjective in nature. So we've got to change that. And we've changed it by creating guidelines. So it's not a mandate. It's just we recommend you do this. And if you look at number 2, conformity, the way the ordinance reads today, and again, this was just the black section, that first sentence says all proposed subdivisions shall be planned so as to facilitate the most advantageous development of the entire neighboring area. That's subjective, right? That's subjective. So to get to all objective standards, we're providing a guide and saying that you should do that, okay? Now, I don't have enough time, and you don't want me to sit here and talk about the 58 pages that are being changed, but you get the gist of what's happening here is we're going from general requirements that have subjectivity and going to all objective. We also are creating a new section 6.200B, and those things that we do that are objective, such as access to parks and schools and half streets and access to between adjoining properties and reservation, dedication to school sites, those are requirements, so we're putting them under requirements. So we're just separating the subjective stuff out and saying that's a guide, and all the objective things we're putting as a general requirement. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what we're doing here. So some changes that have happened in the last few days. So what the ordinance says that if we make changes to the ordinance, we can do so, but we need to present the changes since the agenda went out to you. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of explain some changes that were made from what came in your agenda packet, and the ordinance says you need to present these at the public hearing. So here's the change that's happening. So our subdivision ordinance, this section about reservation dedicating of school sites, everything that you see in blue and red is new language that's being added, and you'll see that strikeout section below. That's the part where the state, we allow the developer to pay funds if they choose to put funds in for the school site and park site. We've struck that out, and the change that we're making is we reworded it to comply with 160D statute. So I will have to acknowledge Emily and Jacob, our attorneys, who have, they're the ones that went through this with a fine-tooth comb and making sure that our language matches up exactly with what the state statutes allow us to do. So this just then codifies how you go about providing that money, and it uses it in the terms that the state statutes authorize us to do it in. Okay? Another change that was concerning to the attorneys, and it's with the zoning ordinance changes, so that's a kind of a separate document, and there's not as many changes. There are only 4 pages of changes we did there. And you are all familiar with this. When a development comes in, invariably, it seems like there's a lot of folks saying block length waiver, okay? So the way the ordinance is written today is we have standards, but because it's quasi-judicial, when it comes to the town board, the language that we have in the ordinance says that if you come across these, railroad tracks or environmental constraints such as creeks and so forth, and somebody needs a longer block length, they can ask the permitting authority, and that's your guidance. That was concerning to the attorneys, and so the other thing that we are concerned with as a staff is we don't want to take every little thing to come up to you for an amendment. So how we worded this is that the staff is authorized, in this new language, the staff is authorized to allow a modification up to 30% of whatever that block length is. And then anything more than that has to come to the town board for subdivision variance. Now, my question would be, okay, how many have we approved, and what kind of numbers are we talking about? So we looked at the last 6 years, and we approved 33 subdivisions in the last 6 years. And only 5 of them would have had to have a block length waiver, which would have had to come to the town board, okay? So just kind of a sense of what numbers are we talking about. So that's one change that we are doing. The other thing that we're doing is there's a footnote in section 7.5.3. That's the section that says there's got to be a 20-foot buffer around. The ordinance today reads, the concern of the attorney says that, well, if connectivity is necessary for a high-quality development, then you can waive that. Well, we have streets that stub in different subdivisions and so forth. That concerned the attorneys, so what we just cleaned the language up to simply say that, where street connectivity of subdivisions is required by block length standards, then you don't have to have that 20-foot, right? So that's kind of the change there. So some of the things that you are going to maintain as a town board that will come to you. Traffic impact modification. So if somebody does a traffic impact analysis and then they have to do certain improvements to certain intersections, the way the ordinance reads today is if they want to, they could put more improvements into one intersection as long as it offsets the impact of the other intersections, right? So you can do some trade-off, and that's a town board decision. We're going to keep that. So that's going to stay in the town board's realm, even with this change that's being proposed and discussed. You also will keep the ability to do variances and appeal and interpretation of the subdivision ordinance. The very thing I just mentioned is if you have a block length of excessive length, it's going to come to you, or any other kind of variance or appeal from the subdivision ordinance. So you're going to maintain that as the draft is. So again, it's a lot of information that you received in your agenda packet. I will say this went to the Huntersville Ordinances Advisory Board last month, and it was a very broad discussion. And so they did not come to a conclusion. So it is coming to the Huntersville Ordinances Advisory Board on Thursday, and possibly we will have a recommendation on Thursday. It's not unusual that we would have the public hearing and we would present to you what the Huntersville Ordinance Advisory Board says. So you could take that in consideration. So we will not have that until Thursday. So an option would be, if you want to, you could continue this public hearing for another 30 days, which would be June the 6th, 6 p.m. here at Huntersville Town Hall. And that would give the opportunity for the Huntersville Ordinances Advisory Board to get you the final recommendation on this text amendment and to both the subdivision ordinance and the zoning ordinance. And with that, I'm finished and happy to try to answer any questions.
So before we move to questions, I do have a question for the board. We have two people who have signed up to speak. Would you like to wait? And would you like to ask your questions now, or would you like to hear from the two people who have signed up to speak? People? People. Everyone's good with people? Sounds like a plan. Thank you, Mr. Semino. Amy Hallman. As you come up, please state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Amy Hallman, 100 Cambridge Road. When you asked to remove the quasi-judicial hearings from your plate, at first I was excited too, but I have many questions. I didn't realize it would require rewriting large parts, 58 pages, according to Mr. Semino's staff report, of the subdivision ordinances to make the subjective ordinances objective, mostly because I trusted the word that the board members cannot, not should not, talk to anyone about the topics. I was dumbstruck that there was a need to rewrite ordinances because they are subjective. Just in order to pass off the quasi-judicial hearings to the planning staff, it stands to reason that there's some wiggle room for these decisions right now in the quasi-judicial hearings. At present, the quasi-judicial process is not simply black or white, and I'm still trying to learn as much as I can. So I have some questions. This is just the beginning of them, and I hope you'll seek answers to them on your own, as I will. Have you read the general statutes personally that address the process? Where does it say you cannot speak or listen to constituents before the quasi-judicial hearing? Do you know that A, you can speak to people on the topic, and B, the process and decision-making I've witnessed here in the past 2 years is not entirely what can happen? Are you curious what wiggle room there is to be in a quasi-judicial hearing since it isn't entirely black and white? Do you know what constitutes a quasi-judicial hearing in the first place? Are there ways a developer could ensure a quasi-judicial hearing in order to avoid public outcry? Did you know that in essence you were asking the staff to rewrite many of the subdivision and zoning ordinances in order to facilitate this request? I didn't. Do you know you have the option to give the responsibility to the Board of Adjustments as well as other appointed boards, and that it would stay quasi-judicial? Did you know that giving this decision power making to staff will remove the developer sketch plan? We do now. I remember a decision this board had, the discussion this board had made that concessions can be made at that sketch plan level, but that would go away. If you instead give this decision making power to the planning staff, how will you ensure accountability? The staff is whom the developer first goes to. The staff then works with the developer, and then the staff gets to approve the plan. Did you know that means neighborhood meetings are for pushing out information only? Their input will become irrelevant. Did you know that these decisions would no longer require a planning board recommendation at all? Did you ask the staff to handle this or make a recommendation on best practices? What recourse does the taxpayer have if decisions are not acceptable? Because the taxpayer does not vote for staff, can't hire or fire staff, nor can you as the board. Is the only recourse for taxpayers to sue the town? Do you know the first sentence of the conformity section of the ordinance is to be objective? All proposed subdivisions should be planned to facilitate the most advantageous development of the entire neighborhood. Do you feel the power to make these decisions should lie with you, the electeds? We still have a way to go on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel Swift, as you come up, remember to state your name and your address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Rachel Swift. I reside at 13021 Central Avenue. I have many points of contentions with the possibility of quasi-judicial procedures, decisions going to the hands of the planning staff. In the town's procedural Rule 25 on quasi-judicial hearing, it states that the mayor has the authority to rule on the admissibility of evidence and all other procedural issues that may arise during the hearing. If that power is given to the staff, my concern is that I did not vote for the staff to have this power as I did while voting on the mayor and the other commissioners. How do I hold the staff accountable for making these decisions that I do not agree with? The point number 2, in recent hearings here, interested parties have not been able to participate in hearings because they were not deemed to have standing. There is a difference between a person of standing and the powers such a person with standing is allowed to actively participate in that hearing. And an interested party is a person who has the ability to testify, yet does not have the powers that a person of standing has, such as opening and closing statements, calling witnesses, and cross-examining. So I'm unsure if you knew this. My third point being the contrast of interest in line H in the town's rule. Nowhere in the general statute does it state that commissioners nor the mayor may listen to or respond to their constituents on a quasi-judicial hearings, yet they have been directed by the town council not to do so, and with that advisement, they do not. But I asked, isn't that what the board is in place to do, is to listen to our concerns? I asked, have you read the statutes for yourself and had a greater understanding before this task is set to be in the hands of the staff? I ask that these hearings not be passed to the staff to manage, as they should remain in the hands of the boards and the commissioners to decide, and is for you, and is for us, your constituents, to continue to have a voice in the planning development stages, and our voices be heard and understood. Thank you.
Thank you. So now the chair will open it up for questions for Mr. Semino. Commissioner Kovacs.
Thank you for all of this work that you've done on this. I know that the previous board had directed staff to look into lessening the amount of quasi-judicial stuff that came across. Have we, reading what this said in one of your first slides, it says that it doesn't have to go to us, it can go to another board. Have we considered sending this to the Board of Adjustments? Because in my opinion, that seems like a more appropriate place for quasi-judicial decisions to be made.
Let me get to this. I think this is the part we're talking about. So, we were directed by the town board to not have a quasi-judicial subdivision process. So that means taking out all of the subjective standards. If you left in subjective standards, the statutes say it shall be assigned to a governing board, a planning board, or the Board of Adjustments. I would just simply say, if the board wants to keep it quasi-judicial, you could keep that power, you could give it to the planning board, or you could do it to the Board of Adjustments. That means keeping in some subjective standards. But if we remove the subjective standards, it's black or white, either meet it or you don't. Does that help answer that?
Yes, and like I said, I wasn't here previous board when they gave the recommendations. I personally think the subjective standards are appropriate to keep, but I do think that going to the Board of Adjustments would be more appropriate.
Additional questions, comments? Commissioner Munger.
Sure, I tend to agree with Commissioner Kovacs. This is one I've struggled with, obviously sitting on the HOAB. I've seen both sides of this equation. It's a very real struggle. The question I have on Board of Adjustments, if we did kick it over to Board of Adjustments, ultimately they would make the decision and still would not come to this board. Their decision would be the final. Is that correct?
A final decision by them.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Commissioner Kovacs in this matter.
Commissioner Kidwell?
I was just bringing the mic. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I know you want to talk.
No, I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I agree with Commissioner Munger and Commissioner Kovacs on this. My concern is rubber stamping. We're taking the neighborhood meeting, and it's going from, hey, this is what's potentially going to happen, to this is what's happening, deal with it. I think it should go to the Board of Adjustments, but you guys, I don't think anybody in the town doesn't know my feelings on the Board of Adjustments and quasi-judicial and how it should be handled there. Thank you.
Any other comments? Commissioner Partee?
Yeah, I tend to agree with my fellow commissioners. I like seeing the board have hands-on availability to question the developers that come before us regarding their projects. And having experience of in law enforcement and going through just judicial process, there's a certain control that, not control, but there's a certain checks and balances that we need to maintain. I like the board as elected officials to maintain that balance.
Commissioner Phillips?
So the whole quasi-judicial thing, I hate it. I hate it so much. People think that what we're doing, like this whole thing, it's not an easy way to rubber stamp for developments, but I had luck one time with a developer, and I'm going to hold on to that luck for the rest of the time I'm sitting up here. I asked for them to include some affordable senior components to their apartments, and they were able to do that. As it currently stands, we can't do that. We can't make ask of those natures during quasi-judicial. So for me, I love the thought of getting this away from us. We're not professionals, we're just elected. So that when situations are happening, we can make those asks and keep our fingers and toes crossed for the right things to happen and good things to happen. I think probably more than I know for a fact anybody up here, I've recused myself from quasi-judicials because of things I felt ethically I had to. For example, I will throw this one all the time, Hope House. Inherently, I could not sit here even as an expert in homelessness because I had emotional opinions about homelessness. So therefore, I recused myself. And I feel like we're getting into development situations as things continue to go, where we're getting ourselves into slippery slopes, where you talk about it over here for 2 years, then you go away, and then, oh, surprise, it's quasi-judicial. How do we say that we don't have influence or bias when you've already done this over here, you wait a couple years, and then you go over here and do something? It's really hard not to throw names out there about projects saying this. But I also think, you know, the issue of holding people accountable, you do hold the board accountable. You hold us accountable by keeping, you know, if staff's not doing a good job and we're keeping them around, that's on us. But also, I think that we have to take into consideration too, that by right is by right is by right. And we can't let the public influence us when something is by right. So that, to me, creates a new obstacle, if we like it or not. I think the best thing we could ever do is take quasi-judicial away from the board, because then it stops being political, and we let it go to the Board of Adjustments, who, God bless them, only operate quasi-judicial, because I hate it every second.
Anyone else? I would just say this. If you are going to keep quasi-judicial, in my humble opinion, you were elected and you should keep quasi-judicial at this board. Passing it off to an appointed board allows this board to say, I didn't do it. So I would also like to open the floor up for Ms. Sloop. If you have anything that you would like to add to the discussion, maybe
The only thing I would add is that the same standards, conflicts of interest, will now apply to the Board of Adjustment members. So they will have to follow the quasi-judicial process. They will have to be subject to the rules regarding ex parte communications. So by taking it from the town board and moving it to the Board of Adjustment, that doesn't change that fact. I just wanted to make that point of clarification.
Which would then mean the board could not talk to the Board of Adjustments on the issues that they would be taking up.
Correct. They couldn't have ex parte communications about the matters.
Right. Commissioner Munger?
Yeah, question for the attorney, and my apologies for if it doesn't make sense, but one of the things I had come to understand is as long as communication is done to the board in its entirety, that communication can be reviewed by whether it would be our board or Board of Adjustments. It can't be reviewed if it's me and Derek got something and the rest didn't.
Not 100% sure I followed the question, but essentially, the decision-making body, whether it be the town board or the Board of Adjustment, all has to base its decision off of information presented at the evidentiary hearing.
Never before.
Exactly. They have to follow a specific standard regarding the evidence. It has to be competent, material, substantial, and it has to be something that the entire board, whether it be Board of Adjustment or this board, is presented with. It would not be something that you heard in passing or that you received via email.
Right, yeah, and I was just, I guess my misunderstanding was, to your point, yes, as long as the entire board is informed, whether it be us or Board of Adjustments, but my understanding was that it could occur at any time, not necessarily at the time of the hearing.
No, it's supposed to be at the evidentiary hearing, which is why, for example, now, even though the planning board makes a recommendation, you can't consider the planning board's recommendation.
Fair point. Thank you.
I mean, doesn't that, sorry,
Commissioner Kidwell?
doesn't that just seem ridiculous that we can send it to a planning board, let them make a decision, but we can't talk to them about the decision, but the notes, the meeting notes are available for us to read. And we read those before. I mean, once, yeah, I mean, and I'm not questioning the legality of it by any means, it's just, plain and simple, it's stupid. It's just stupid.
What is the difference?
I will just, to respond to that as a point of clarification, the UNC School of Government does not recommend the planning board making a recommendation, and I had also made that recommendation.
But what's the difference between reading the planning board minutes and reading an email from someone else? If we get it all at the same time, wouldn't they be
Again, it's not illegal to have planning board make a recommendation to perhaps try to smooth out outstanding staff comments between staff and the developer, but the town board making the quasi-judicial decision is not supposed to consider material outside of the evidentiary hearing, and they are also not supposed to take into consideration anything re the planning board's recommendation.
So what I heard is that your recommendation was that it not go to the planning board?
I've had conversations with planning staff about that as a possibility in the past, and we've talked about the fact that School of Government does not recommend that.
So it's not a best practice?
Exactly.
Mr. Roberts?
Yeah, and I think that's why boards want to get rid of the quasi-judicial, because it's just a legal nightmare. I mean, you're an elected official, every citizen wants to talk to you, then you basically got to say, well, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you, this is quasi-judicial. What do you mean? I elected you, I can't talk to you. So it's frustrating for board members, they sit up here, and the quasi-judicial, you literally have to, I mean, it's supposed to happen right here in the hearing, and that's what you're supposed to base it on. So it's just a legal cluster. And I think that's why boards have been frustrated with the quasi-judicial, because I, as an elected official, I cannot talk to the folks who just elected me. I have to say, no, come here and talk at the hearing. And that's what's so frustrating, I think, for board members, previous board members, assuming some of the existing board members. It's a tough decision. I hate quasi-judicial because it's a legal nightmare waiting to happen.
I think at the end of the day, it's the board's got to decide whether or not it, first of all, does quasi-judicial give you any true level of flexibility, and weigh that through creating an ordinance that is very clear-cut. You either meet the criteria or you don't. And I have, myself, have struggled with, do you give it up or do you not? Because I see the value but in both directions. Commissioner Phillips?
So, like, for me, like, two other red flags, it's red flags everywhere. We'll trade land or we'll sell land to developers with projects that will eventually be quasi-judicial. It's a board decision to do these things. We all say our little piece, this is good, this is bad, and then we know why we're doing it, and then we step away. And then we got to pretend like, oh, we don't know anything. I think it's problematic, and I know our legal staff does a great job keeping us out of trouble, but I still feel like it's insincere and performative nonsense. And I'm like, I don't want to do that while I'm up here. And like the whole Board of Adjustments thing, Board of Adjustments is accountable because we're the ones who appoint them. So if we're appointing clowns up there, that should fall back on us. Like, I am so sick of sitting here and having, the one that just did me in with quasi-judicial forever was when a mom was not considered to be an expert in her kid's safety. I can assure you, nobody up on this board is more of an expert on a parent's child safety than that parent or the guardian. And that did me in, because if a mom says that's too close to my mailbox, I'm worried about my kid getting hurt, that is an expert. That's my 2 cents. Sorry, I hate this.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Boone?
Yes, Jack, could you go back to your very last screen? Yeah, right there, thank you, sir. I was on the Board of Adjustments, and I was on the Planning Board, and that's one of the first things you learn is that you can't discuss a quasi-judicial case with anybody in the grocery store. You've got to go on what the evidence is. When you look at this as the current, a neighborhood meeting, we can't go to the neighborhood meeting. The proposal is we still can't go to the neighborhood meeting, correct?
The proposal is you could go to the neighborhood meeting. So under the gray, the proposed, you could go to that meeting, but that meeting is more informative to the neighbors. This is the proposed development that's coming down, which we see value in, which is, we didn't have to keep that in there, but that anybody could attend that, including town board members, with this new standard, because the decision, and to that matter, and I'll just leave this to Emily to comment on, our recommendation is we got rid of all the subjective requirements and just put them as guidelines, and then just had all objective standards that would then be a staff approval. That was recommended from the School of Government, which you see up here, because there's no room to negotiate. But if I go back to the statutes, it says here that in 160D803, if the final decision on a subdivision plat is administrative, the decision may be assigned to staff, which is what we proposed in the text amendment and what the School of Government recommends. But the subdivision on objective standards could also go to the town board. And if it did go to the town board, you could attend a neighborhood meeting. And that, and obviously, I'll let Emily jump in, but if it's all objective standards and there's a neighborhood meeting to share information, I don't see where anybody couldn't attend, including town board members. It's the only difference is there's not subjective criteria there that you can start to negotiate some finer points.
Basically black and white.
It's black and white. Now, on the advantage of that is the town board will hear input from citizens on what they like or don't like about your rules, right? So, and that would even apply even if it was a staff approval, because you're invited, the town board is absolutely able to attend neighborhood meetings. And you can hear that feedback. So when there's a question about accountability, if we go out of quasi-judicial and accountability, I would just say staff is responsible under the proposal to approve or deny the subdivision, but it's to meet the standards that were adopted by the town board. And so if we don't like those standards, then it is the town board who has to adopt different standards. So that's the accountability part on that.
Okay, if I go to a town board, a neighborhood meeting, and neighbors are out there answering questions, can I take their answers as evidence if I get ready to make a decision?
So
I'll jump in. So it depends on which type of process we're operating under. If we're operating under quasi-judicial, the evidence is the evidence at the hearing. Nothing else is evidence. That means if you're at a meeting and you're not at the hearing, you cannot consider that evidence. Now, if we transition to an administrative approval process, because the town board is no longer a quasi-judicial decision maker, you can speak to the citizens. It would be an administrative decision at that point. We remove the subjective standards. So you can talk to them about it. You're no longer the decision maker if we move to staff administrative decisions.
That's where I have a problem, because I can talk to people, they like it, they don't like it, everybody hates it, but staff says, yeah, we're going to go ahead and go for this. They're upset at me, but I have no decision on it. And the last point I'd like to make is quasi-judicial. We had a major discussion of what quasi-judicial meant with the Board of Adjustment and what the town attorney thought quasi-judicial meant. We had a lengthy discussion on that. Mr. Kidwell, I believe you spoke at the public hearing on that.
I did. It was well planned by the board.
I'm sorry?
It was well planned.
Okay. All right, that's my questions, but I just don't, we need to do our job, the town board.
So to go off what Commissioner Boone asked, if we keep it quasi-judicial and it goes to Board of Adjustments, can we attend the neighborhood meetings?
Yes, you can attend the neighborhood meetings. The quasi-judicial process, if it's moved to the Board of Adjustments, would then prevent the Board of Adjustment members, who are now the decision makers, from having ex parte communications with the citizens.
Then we can talk to the developer and
You can, but you can't then go talk to the Board of Adjustment members and have ex parte communications with them.
Okay.
So as you can see, this is a pretty simple issue. And so again, the Ordinances Advisory Board has not made a recommendation. If the board directs us to do something else, so what moving parts we can do, and we don't have to make it a staff. We're following the recommendation if we change to objective standards to keep it to staff approval per the School of Government, but it could go to the town board, or it could go to the planning board, or it could go to the Board of Adjustments. So that's out there. I will say if subdivisions go to the Board of Adjustments because, as Commissioner Phillips said, they're the experts. They always deal in quasi-judicial hearings. We would need to obviously have, work sessions with the Board of Adjustments because, basically ever since they existed in Huntersville, it's just one piece of property, and now all of a sudden it is a much bigger piece of pie that they have to work with. So obviously there will be training, which is not lost on anybody here, but we would just have to have those conversations. We are available to make any other adjustments, give you other alternatives if you would like. But the choices are administrative or quasi-judicial, and there's pluses and minuses with either.
That's right. So it's going to the HOAB on Thursday. Do we want to leave this public hearing open until June the 6th? And if so, is there a motion to do so? Commissioner Partee?
I'd like to make a motion to keep the petition TA 2205 open until June 6th.
At what time and where?
6 p.m. Town Hall.
Okay. And there is a motion, there is a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, we will leave this public hearing open until June the 6th. We will now move to item 10B. (9B)? 10B.
It depends on your.
Okay. Vincent, okay. And this is a resolution to approve a conveyance of .78 acres. I'll open it up. Ms. Sloop?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is .78 acres that the town board previously approved to dispose of through the upset bid process. We did not receive any additional upset bids aside from the initial offer. So at this point in time, the matter has come back to the town board for consideration.
All right. Is there a motion? Yes? Commissioner Boone?
Motion to approve resolution conveying .78 acres of PIN 015121115 to Bowman Acquisition LLC pursuant to the upset bid process.
Is there a second? Commissioner Kovacs? All those in favor? Or should I say any discussion? Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? It is a 5-1 vote. We will now move to item 10B. Consider approving new salary ranges based on the fiscal year '22 study. Ms. Cagle, how are you this evening? Good, how are you? Good, thank you. Thank you for being with us.
So I'll do just a quick history of how we review our ranges. Typically, we have a large classification and compensation study. The last full one we did was in 2015. At the end of that one, and over the last few years, we've decided to move to a process where we review a third of the positions each year, so that within a 3-year period, we're reviewing all of our positions. So in October of 2021, we contracted with Susan Manning, human resources consultants that we've worked with, to review the first third of those positions. And we identified the engineering, planning, and public works departments for a few reasons. One, we have a lot of turnover in the public works department, so wanting to make sure that the positions there were where they need to be. Engineering, we've had some trouble recruiting with the engineering positions. And then planning, because as we look at a group, we want to have similar type positions reviewed at the same time. So the technical level required for engineering, public works, and planning were a good fit to review those 3 departments together. So with that, and we just reviewed the police department really and made some changes with them last year, so knowing that we have some recruiting issues there. So with that, we looked at 24 positions in those departments. We surveyed 18 municipalities. We looked at the League of Municipality survey data and Catapult, which you may know as the Employers Association, for some private market data as well. The result of that told us that we had several positions that were below market. And what that means for us is when we look at the positions, we're looking at the average actual salaries of the places that we study. 5% below, 5% above helps us identify a market range. We compare that market range to our median salary and see whether or not that salary, the median salary, is within the market range. So we found that we had several positions that were below market, and we also, in looking at those, matched up other positions. So, for example, with our Public Works technician position, which is at the lowest range right now in our salary grades, we also have the Parks and Rec technicians, we have a building services technician, and a program leader. So did it make sense for us to recommend changing just one out of that when the types of requirements for those positions are very similar? So all in all, we ended up looking at 13 positions to move. What you have with the agenda, with the packet, is the proposal for the new ranges. It takes all of those positions that were at our bottom range, 75, moving them up to a range 76. It also moved some of our engineering inspector positions up, and our Public Works operation manager, and then our staff engineer positions. Not just the staff engineer, the engineering positions. I'm happy to answer any questions. Yeah.
Commissioner Phillips?
Kevin might as well get up here because I'm going to ask a bunch of questions. The Public Works technician, is that salary or is that hourly?
Hourly.
And what do they make hourly?
So this proposal increases that hourly rate to $15.05.
Okay. Kevin, the people who would be making $15.05, do they have any sort of accreditations to operate machinery, or you want to explain that?
That would not be required at the technician level. The next level up is our equipment operator level, and that would be the ones who we would be looking at to operate the equipment.
Okay, your equipment operators, how much do they make an hour? Or are they salary?
Their salary as well, and their range is,
I can, it's $39,525. Let me see what that is.
Okay.
just under 20, I believe that's.
Yeah. Okay. And how long does it take someone to go from like a tech to a machinery operator?
They could do it in any amount of time. We've actually had some candidates that came in that were, we started them at the technician level, and you know, we always try to give them on-the-job training and some opportunity to get on the equipment and kind of hone their skills in, and we've had people move as quickly as, 4 to 6 months.
So are you having issues getting technicians right now?
Yes,
your
ma'am.
entry levels? What we're offering, is that competitive with other places? I mean,
Based on the data, we believe so. I know it doesn't compare to the private sector at all.
are you losing a lot of people to the private sector?
We've lost a few to them, and then other folks we've lost. They warehouse workers, they can go drive a forklift and make more money. So it's not necessarily we're losing them to our same industry, but there's just jobs where they don't have to work as hard and make, a lot of times more money.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Commissioner Boone?
Thank you. Athletic coordinator, maxed out at $74,840 on their salary, right? And you look at a police officer one, he maxes out at $65,000. I just can't see that there's a huge difference there. And even a master police officer making 82, just like 1,700 more than a tournament supervisor. Why is that? I don't see that.
So when we look at where we grade positions, we look at a variety of factors. That includes knowledge, so what education requirements are there. It looks at supervisory responsibility, so some positions have supervisory responsibility that others don't. Scope, obviously, scope and impact of the position. How much supervision the employee needs to have, whether they work fairly independently or they have more strict supervision. So there's a variety of factors, that's not all of them, that we look at when we decide where positions fit, so that we're putting positions of, that have similar responsibilities together, similar factors together. So that's one piece of it.
So you're saying that a tournament supervisor is paid more because he has more responsibility than a senior 55 grade police officer. There's got to be supervision on his side. There's got to be responsibilities on their side, training.
Yes, there are, like I said, a variety of factors that go into it. The facility and tournament supervisor does have a lot of full and part-time supervisory responsibility at the parks. It's a different level of responsibility, but when you look at the scope, it factors differently.
Okay, I'll disagree.
Mr. Roberts?
Yeah, and all this is driven by market. So, we go look at the market. We look at other places, what they're paying, the ranges. So this is not Laura, making it up at her house at night. So when we go look at these, we got to be competitive, obviously. And as you know, our police salaries and all of our salaries are very competitive. So we want to look at market. We want to stay above our adjoining towns, et cetera. And you'll see some of the stuff that we recommend in manager's recommended budget. But I get it, a person carries a gun, or whether they tote a fire hose, or whether they, pick up basketballs at the gym. All this stuff is looked at a market level, and so that we can be competitive.
Any other questions? Commissioner Kidwell?
Thank you, Ms. Cagle. And I don't think you're making this up in your home, but I believe I understand what Commissioner Boone is saying. And from my time on the board previously and even currently, it's my understanding, and I appreciate this, the numbers here, but are we competitive with CMPD with these numbers? Are they right in line?
First time, I would say, in a long time. I don't know how many, Barry probably can tell you, how many we've hired from CMPD is unbelievable compared to what we have in previous years. Probably tenfold compared to what we've done in previous years.
So what that tells me, and I might shock people here by saying this, is that we're vastly, and I think we've all known this, we're vastly underpaying our police officers. If one of them decides to give up the uniform and the headache of being an officer and transitions over to Parks and Rec to become a permanent supervisor.
It hadn't happened. It doesn't happen.
I'm not saying it happens. I'm just saying people are leaving jobs left and right.
Absolutely.
And benefits and pay are the major factors.
That's why we're here before you, and that's why you're going to see us continue to push that at the department level and at the manager level. We hadn't been full yet since I've been here. I wish one day I could come to you and tell you we're full in all departments. Every department's having that same issue, and we are continuing to push the envelope on pay raises, benefits, ranges. That's why we have to study every year. So I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying we're pushing that envelope to continue to look at that.
What is our average age for a police officer one?
I can tell you our average age overall is mid-40s, but for police officer one, I I can find out and let you know.
I'm just curious, that's your police officer that's just coming out of BLET. They're not in a supervisory role. But I understand the differences between the jobs.
And remember, we don't hire at the minimum. Very seldom we get people to come in like officers. I mean, we hire, that's why we got these incentives and various things that just because you have a range doesn't mean you hire at the minimum. And most of the time, you don't, because you're not going to get the people at the minimum. So you have to continue to adjust those ranges. I don't know when the last time we hired at the minimum. Very few times.
Commissioner Partee.
Just one question. In regards to the maximum salary, the benefits, health, dental, whatever we offer, eyeglasses, that factor in to the maximum?
No, they're separate.
They're separate? What is the cost? How does that boost? What is the top salary? When you factor that in, what's the maximum cost or salary that they would be making?
I'm going to quote from, I believe what Jackie said in the last meeting, it's close to 30% on top.
On top of that, 30%? Okay.
Right.
That's my question.
Right. And we fund employee-only coverage 100%.
What benefits do they get, may I ask?
We do medical 100% for employee only, dental 100% for employee only, and then they have the ability to do additional voluntary benefits at their cost. We also have long-term disability is 100% town funded, and life insurance is 100%.
Do they contribute at all to the benefits? Pardon? Do they contribute at all out of their salary?
Depends on what level they select. So if they have employee or family coverage, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You still have the 401K match?
We do a straight contribution. It's not a match requirement, 5%.
Okay.
Any other questions? Is there a motion on the floor?
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve new salary ranges as proposed in the FY 2022 compensation study.
Second.
There is a motion and there is a second. Any discussion? Commissioner Phillips.
I'm not going to support this, and I'm sorry, it's nothing against you, but I think it's disgusting that our town pays less than Amazon.
Commissioner Kovacs.
I feel the same when we were talking about like the public works technicians and everyone in that 76 category, and we said $15.05 an hour. That's shocking because you can drive down the road and see someone that works on, in manufacturing and makes 16 or 17 an hour. So I would like to see our minimums up a little more. I wanted to, Commissioner Partee asked about benefits being included in the maximum. I wanted to ask, that doesn't include if they are able to work overtime, correct? For the police
maximum,
officers.
correct.
I'm not in support of these ranges, but again, because I do think that we are a little on the low end. Nothing against you and the work that you've done, but I think our employees do deserve more than what we're showing here.
Commissioner Munger.
I certainly appreciate the opinions being offered, and I tend to also agree that they're a little bit low, but the one thing that we have to keep in mind is if we do vote no, we leave it as is, which is lower than it should be by a far margin. What we're trying to do is make up some ground here to get us to what Ms. Cagle has done actual studies to say is what a norm is. And I also appreciate some of the comments about the police officers. Police officers are grossly underpaid, but trying to compare different positions, some people are built to be police officers. We love the fact. I am not. I will never be a police officer. I don't have what it takes to do the wonderful things you do. Never will. And that's a reality I've accepted. So at the same time, do I deserve to be compensated at a similar level as a police officer for what I do? And the market has determined that for me. And what Ms. Cagle's done is done a survey of the market and said, this is what the market will bear, similar to what I do when I look for a job. I look out there and I say, what will the market bear? What will it pay me? I won't compare it to how a police officer is paid. I compare it to how my peers are paid. And that's what we're trying to do here. A little bit high on anxiety right now, sorry. But what we're trying to do the right thing. And I 100% appreciate that, yeah, we should be paying them more. It's just, I'm trying to drive that point home. We're trying to get there. We're trying to get to a point where we're paying the people for the jobs that they do in a similar fashion to their peers. And that's all we're trying to accomplish here. We're trying to get people money. So if you do vote no, know that you're going to leave them way shortchanged. We're trying to get there. So that's what a yes vote here is. And I'm sorry for rambling.
Mr. Roberts?
So Laura, you used an outside consultant to help you do this market study, correct? Correct. And I think we're looking at a range here. So remember, the person who comes in the door, we don't just say you get the minimum. It just doesn't happen these days. So you're hiring folks within that range based on their experience. Now, if they can fog a mirror and that's it, yeah, they probably make the minimum. So we have to look at what experience and experience levels change these days. But we did use an outside consultant, and I want to make sure when I get to my manager's presentation, all of what y'all saying should fall right in the line with the COLA and merit and all that. So I'm hearing you, and I don't disagree. But we are trying to raise these ranges, but remember, it's not hiring the person at the minimum. Very seldom that happens. So we want to continue. Remember, we're trying to raise these ranges for these employees, and we're going to continue to look at it, a third, a third, a third. We may have to bring that in with the way the market's changing, do a half instead of a third, a third, a third, because things are changing so rapidly. So we are trying to raise these ranges up so that we can pay folks more, but we are not paying at the minimum very seldom.
So there is a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion passes 4-2. Thank you, Ms. Cagle, and thank you for all of the effort and work that you've put into this. And I have to say, I love seeing the passion from this board as they talk about our employees and making sure that they're being paid appropriately. Next on the item on the docket is 10D. It's a social media policy for elected and appointed officials. Is there a motion on the floor? Commissioner Munger.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve the Town of Huntersville social media policy for elected officials and members of appointed boards, committees, and commissions.
Second.
There is a second. Any discussion? Commissioner Kidwell.
I'm not going to support this. I don't think it's the town's. The town should not be setting a policy for elected officials. If we say something stupid on the internet, we usually have to bear the grunt of that. It has no teeth. It's essentially just a piece of paper worth nothing. I don't think we need to move forward with this.
Anyone else? I will say that I understand it doesn't have teeth, but I do think it sets best practices for all of us to follow. You can't force any of us to do or say, but you can set forth best practices. There's a motion. Commissioner Kovacs?
Because this includes elected, appointed boards, committees, and commissions, what is the recourse for someone that is on an appointed board and goes against one of these? Do they get removed, or does anything happen?
Ms. Loop, would you like to address that?
The town board always has the prerogative to adjust appointed board and committee and commissions memberships. So if it, I would say, were something that rose to the level that the town board felt that action was needed, then yes, they could take action.
All right, so there is a motion, there is a second. All those in favor? Those opposed? Guess I get to vote. I do think that these are best practices that not only this board, but all of our appointed boards can follow. I think that it gives us a opportunity to have some guidance where there has not been any in the past. So I will vote to approve. All right. We are now going back to, correct? The manager's budget. I've been reading your mind over there, like where are we headed? We're going back to the manager's budget. Mr. Roberts, I'd like to turn this over to you.
I guess I better go over here. Once I may have to borrow Mr. Boone's glasses, because I left mine, I can't find them. Well, I'm blind, so it's not good, but I'm sure maybe we got it memorized. But Mayor, let me just make sure this got everything working here. All right. There we go. All right. So before you tonight, I want to present the FY23 budget, manager's recommended budget. Probably heard a lot of this stuff in here. You will hear it multiple more times because we have a public hearing, may have some more workshops, and then we're proposed to adopt the budget first meeting in June. So you may get sick of hearing the same thing over and over again. This is sort of a high-level presentation. It's a 200-page document. Take it home and read all 200 pages. What I will tell you to focus on is the manager's message, about 7 pages. That'll kind of give you a little more in depth of the 200 pages. But I'm going to hit the highlights tonight. And like I said, we'll have more chance for questions, more chance for interaction, et cetera. So first slide is a summary of numbers. And I'm going to look at the big screen because I can probably see that better with my glasses, without my glasses. So this budget complies with general statutes and the board's policies. The general fund budget is roughly, and I'm going to use estimate numbers, I'm not going to read you cents and all that. So the general fund budget is roughly $61 million. That's an increase of 7.5% since FY22. Enterprise funds, there's multiple enterprise funds. You have the Electric Enterprise Fund and also HFFA, which is Aquatic Center. Electric Enterprise Fund is roughly $31 million. That's up 6%. A lot of that you'll see later on is due to growth and substations, et cetera. And the HFFA is roughly flat at $3.6 million. Special revenue funds, multiple special revenue funds, Transportation Reserve, Commerce Station, Land Development, which equals about $3.4 million. And then the total funds is $98.7 million. As everyone knows, property values is our highest revenue. The assessed value for FY23 estimate is roughly $10.7 billion. And that is we're growing at roughly 3%. We're the highest in the county as projected so far. The tax rate proposed in the manager's recommended budget is 24 cents. That's the same as has been in the prior 3 years. And then what does 1 penny generate? 1 penny tax rate generates roughly $1,040,000. Getting to the general fund revenue changes. So the top 3 revenues is property tax, sales tax, and utility sales tax. That comprises of roughly 82% of the general fund revenue. Solid waste fee, we're proposing to go up $17 annual to $126 annual. And this pays for approximately 55% of the solid waste collection. There are no changes proposed to the vehicle fee. The vehicle fees typically pay for transportation items, and then stormwater fee proposed to stay the same, which pays for stormwater items. From a personnel side of things, we've talked about 14 positions. Those 14 positions are listed here. Excuse me. 4 of those are victims advocate team, which would be civilians that will work alongside the police department to handle what I'd say mental health, different type issues there, social work type issues. School resource officers, we all know that COVID hasn't been good to any of us. There's been a lot of issues in the schools, and we have 1 resource officer at a lot of these schools, so we're adding more resource officers, so 3 positions in resource officers, and then adding another captain. Right now, we have 2 captains in the police department. Department our size, we need to split more of the duties. Some of the research shows you'll see 4 to 5 captains in agencies our size, and then also a fleet service coordinator, which will handle, that'll be a civilian position that will handle everything sort of related to our fleet. You know, when you get dispose of police cars, you purchase police cars, oil changes, tire rotation, light bars, taking them off, taking them on, putting in mobile units, et cetera, et cetera. And then the other positions that are proposed to be funded in this budget are engineering technician. We've got tons of road projects going on, sidewalk projects, et cetera. The engineering technician will do things like keep up with the sidewalk, ADA compliance, et cetera. IT help desk, we have three IT folks. This will be adding a 4th IT person. Anything phone, mobile phone, cell phone, landline, computer, laptops, mobile data units in the cars, streaming meetings, cameras out on the greenways, cameras in the buildings, et cetera, goes through IT. Transportation planner position we're looking at in the planning department as we continue to look at how we get more funding in transportation. What I'll say is the old Bill Cox position. Right now, transportation duties are sort of split between multiple planners. What we'll be doing is having a transportation planner focus mostly on the transportation stuff, and because we're getting overloaded in planning with permits and with all the different plans, from the mobility plan to the downtown plan to the 2040 plan, and actually making those things, all the different action things that come out of those plans. And then the last item on this slide is converting 2 part-time park and rec positions to a one full-time position, and then adding back in the recreation superintendent position. From a personnel level pay proposal, maybe I should say amen to what all y'all said earlier, so I'm gonna hold you to it. So what we're proposing to fund here is a 6% COLA adjustment, then also average 1% merit pool, and we base this information on the CPI that we look at, Social Security, and first quarter CPI numbers that you see before you. Now also, we were talking about ranges earlier. When you do the COLA, the ranges would move up too. So the bottom end of that range that we were talking about, I forgot what Laura said it was. Okay, so that range is going to move up by 6%. So whatever the ranges were for each position will automatically move up by 6%. It will adjust with the COLA. So that means, there you go.
As much as Amazon.
So this will adjust with that, which is a good thing. Obviously, we've, the board, we haven't done an adjustment in board pay in over 10 years. If you recall, we talked about that. We will be taking out the phone allowance, et cetera, and just making it one set rate. With that increase, it's roughly $42,000, and then that will adjust with CPI every year. As retirement percentage increases, adds about $162,000 to the budget. Looking at operating debt expenditures, from the operating side, from the fire department, the biggest adjustment here is due to the $1 an hour pay increase. The increase in fire department is roughly $337,000, but the majority of it is the $1 hour pay increase. And then you got motor fuels and then equipment for the new trucks. The solid waste additional cost is $482,000. We're adding more homes all the time. Obviously, they have fuel adjustments, CPI adjustments, et cetera. So it's a $482,000 cost increase associated with that. And then funding for external agencies, with the board decisions, that will increase over previous year roughly $71,000. From a debt standpoint, there's no new debt service payments funded in FY '23. Total debt service FY '23 is actually decreasing by roughly $240,000. From a general fund departmental capital, various expenses here. We've got to do some work here on Town Hall. The roof continues to leak. If it's raining tonight, there's probably someone be holding a cup or a bucket somewhere. So we've got to continue to do some improvements to the roof. We've held off on that. We've done some patching. I think MJ and his crew has been over here and did some patching for the last so many years. And the restroom renovations, the stalls are, swaying. So if you lean up against a stall, you may fall on the floor. So we need to do some improvements there. I haven't been in the ladies' room, but I hear it's not that great. I can only tell you about the men's bathroom, and it's the same. 15 police vehicles that rolling stock that we'll be replacing. Siegel security fencing, we have a lot on the back of Siegel that was purchased quite a few years ago, and we need to fence that in as we build those buildings back there, or build buildings, and also have equipment stored on site. Parks and Recreation, replacing a car and then also a bus. It's roughly a 15-passenger bus that will have ADA accessibility, so you'll have the handicap ramps, et cetera. Then also cameras in parks. And then from the salt spreader, replacing the salt spreader, those get worn out. And then a mowing tractor, which includes the mowers. You have a side mower, rear mower. That's probably 30,000 of the 120. It's probably roughly 100 horsepower tractor for cutting the grass and the shoulders, et cetera. Those will be paid for funds. As far as it replace a street sweeper, there's a street sweeper we will be replacing. That is, I want to say 20 plus years old. Trying to get parts for that is next to impossible. We will be paying for those with stormwater funds. And then on the general fund, major capital, remember, these are not the total dollars for these projects. This is just the dollars that are funded in FY '23. So don't think that Commerce Center Drive is, 600,000 or, pick one, that is the total amount. They may be for some of these projects, like a North Meck Park grass field, may be the total amount of dollars, but some of these bigger, larger projects, so Church Street, Holbrook's, Delwood is not $500,000. It costs a lot more than that, but that's how much is in the FY '23 budget. So I won't read through all these. I know you've seen these CIP projects, and I'm sure we're going to have some discussions on maybe some of these items later. So as I said, the manager's budget will change, I'm sure, between now and when you adopt it for various reasons. It could be et cetera. So these projects that you've seen up here, quite a few of them we've already spent money on. We can talk about that later as we, after this presentation, if there are certain projects you want to talk about. But most of these projects we talk about year over year, except for some of the smaller projects like a Waymo Park improvements or North Meck, Park grass improvements or a HAP infield turf or Abernathy Park. Some of those smaller projects, maybe just a one and done. We get it done this year, pay for it this year. Transportation reserve, more capital projects, just a different way we pay for some of these road projects. So we fund previously issued debt service on Highway 73, roughly $254,000, and the various projects below are paid for with transportation reserve funds. Remember, this may not be the total price of these projects. This is what we're funding in FY '23. Siegel to 4th, Gibson Park Phase 2, Patterson Road Extension, prior year projects that roll over, and then what we have in the FY '21 audited transportation reserve fund balance is roughly $3 million, and then what those $20 vehicle fee generate, which is approximately $1 million. Other funds, you have tourism fund, Commerce Station, Powell Bill, Land Development. Under tourism, one of the projects we're proposing to pay for with tourism funds is, it must have read Stacy's mind the other night, was actually the Berry Park project, the restroom and parking lot is one of the projects that we'll be paying for with tourism funds. Commerce Station, the joint business park that we have that we share the revenue expenses with adjoining towns, Davidson and Huntersville. We'll use contributions from that to pay for each one of the town's contribution to the EDC. Power bill, excuse me, revenues are flat. The fund balance of, we'll use fund balance of roughly 1.3 million, and then increase the street maintenance expense of about 350,000. We're looking to do more sidewalks, et cetera, paving in town. And land development, we're not proposing to change those fees, but we are we've got so much development coming in town. We are short engineers on some of the stormwater review, et cetera, so we have to farm some of that out. We have to find different ways. If we can't, find those people, then we've got to look at other ways to continue to push those projects out the door. So some of that will be through contract services. Electric fund. On the electric fund, I know Mr. Boone's probably going to give a little report on the electric side of things at one of the meetings he went to recently, but we recommend no rate changes for FY23. We'll be looking at a cost of service study. We need to do a debt issuance on a substation because we've got to tie the systems back in. We've got more growth, so we've got to continue to look at that. We're pushing off any residential rate increases. The cost of service study will help us in the future years. On the expense side of electric, I'll just stop because I know Mr. Boone's going to talk a little bit about some of this, but on the expense side, we've got a substation. We've got to put in a substation and continue to take care of our growth that we have in town. It's just massive growth that we got to continue to keep up with. HFFA, I think I talked to you a little bit earlier, that's pretty flat. Their budget, $7,000 increase. We've got some new facilities coming online up the street. Continue to look at that. Membership participate right now will decline. On the expense side, we've got some capital items. That building's getting old. Pool heaters, boilers, diving equipment. And the one that continues to give us love is the air filtration system. We got to figure out a solution for the air filtration system. I know Mr. Kidwell that sent out an email that we need to have some discussion on that. We've got to find a solution for that, whatever it may be, so I'm sure we'll talk about that later. And then ARP funding, which we've talked about quite a bit. As you know, we've received $2.4 million. The other $2.4 should come in June 22. What the board said is that to allow maximum flexibility is to use those funds to supplant police salaries. That way we can be more flexible and not put a bunch of government burdens on other maybe agencies that we fund, et cetera. That $4.8 million, as I said, is we should get the rest of it June 22. We expect the other $12 million. We'll come back to you at some point in time and talk about, once we get that in, how do we spend that and get board feedback on that. The budget process moving forward. After tonight, I did mention a 200-page document. Feel free to go home and, it's probably a good bathroom read. But if you want the short version, read the first 7 pages or so and look at the manager's message. All this will be posted on the website possibly tomorrow, no later than Wednesday. Public hearing is set for May 16th, and then look to adopt the budget June 6th. I know that was fairly fast, Mayor. All this stuff will be online. Hopefully you have a book. I imagine, as I said, whatever I told you tonight, there will be some changes. And I guess that's it, unless Patty, Jackie have anything to add. Thank all the department heads, Patty especially, Jackie, everyone for helping put this together, because I can tell you it wasn't Anthony Roberts' brain trust. It was the smart people behind me that made this happen.
Well, I just want to say thank you for all of the work that you've done. I know every budget season's not an easy one as you go through to make decisions. And so, Mr. Roberts, so thank you to you and to your team for pulling this together. I am sure as we get, the board gets their budget in front of them and they will start developing those questions and they will be bringing them to you. I would like to encourage the board to, as you're developing your questions, get those in front of Ms. Huffman and Mr. Roberts quickly so that you can get your answers back, so that then you can turn around and develop more questions, because I'm sure that's what will happen. Is there anything else from the board? All right. Yes, we will be coming back to this. Yes, we will certainly be coming back to this later. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. We are going to move to the mayor and commissioner reports. And give me a second to pull mine out here. I would like to start with the EDC report. Currently, the EDC is working on 42 projects. 21 of those are in Huntersville. April did bring 2 new projects to the EDC. And over the last month, for the month of April, they hosted a manufacturers mingle and giving an opportunity for our manufacturers up here to get together and to talk. And I have to tell you, there was a point in that mingle where we had some folks over here talking German and then a couple of other folks over here talking Spanish. And it was quite interesting to see the diversity within our manufacturers and all talking the same language of economic growth in what they do. So it was wonderful to see that happen, and I wanted to share that with you. You heard tonight from our partners at CATS. I'm continuing to ask questions in regards to Envision My Ride. I would ask that you also formulate those. I'm encouraging CATS to work with our staff, to work with our planning department as they look at routes, as they look at how we can connect to our neighbors to the north, connect across our community, and obviously our neighbors to the south. But the importance of that and the importance of understanding that our community continues to grow and we're not always going south. We're not always going south in the morning and north in the evening. And Commissioner Kidwell, thank you for bringing up the concept of the 485 piece, because I think that's valuable. Get through here. I know that the board was made aware this morning of our friend at the Raptor Center, Executive Director Jim Warren, and I do want to say that my thoughts and prayers go out to his family and to the staff at the Raptor Center. I know that they're dealing with such great loss as well. So please keep the Raptor Center staff and Mr. Warren's family and friends in your prayers and thoughts. And before I move on to the very last item, just a reminder that Mother's Day is on Monday, or Sunday rather. Please call if your mother is still with you. Make sure you call, send a card, all that wonderful stuff, because mom is mom. And last but not least, I wanted to take a moment to highlight Hello Huntersville yesterday. It was such a wonderful event, and there's so many people out and about, and the music was great. And so if you weren't able to come out, I'll tell you, you missed it. It was fabulous. Mr. Jaycox, job well done to you and your team. But in addition to that, the Downtown Steering Committee held a public forum and engagement opportunity, and you see that here with the big map that was laid out. And I'd like to thank the commissioners who were out talking with the citizens and engaging with them. I can tell you how many people came up wanting to know about the diverging diamond that was happening, or where the Greenway was going, or the Main Street project and the improvements there, and the excitement that that map generated because they were able to see it and see the additional projects that will be coming online shortly. And I, for one, enjoyed talking to the citizens and hearing from them their thoughts and their opinions across the board. And hopefully, we've gotten them to also log in and share their thoughts and opinions. And in addition to that, come out for the May 12th, I believe that's the right date, the May 12th public forum, to engage even more. So these were some of the pictures that were taken. I wanted to make sure that we shared that with all of you. So with that, that is the end of my mayor's report, and I would like to turn it over to Commissioner Boone for his report.
All righty. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the Huntersville Fire Department. Our insurance rating has gone down from a 4 to a 3. And if you have a building in Huntersville or the ETJ area, your insurance bill should be going down the 1st of August. So congratulations to the fire department. Well done for Jim DeToli and his folks. April 25th, Jackie Huffman and myself attended the Electric City's Board of Commissioners meeting in Concord. And the points that I would like to share with this board is that the economical development portion of the meeting mentioned 2 grant opportunities for the town of Huntersville. A SMART grant of $5,000, that is an annual grant, and this is helping the town of Huntersville and its cost of artwork in our town. And I'd just like to say to the art commissioner, job well done. Michael J. Cox, if you could tell him I'd appreciate it. The second grant opportunity is a downtown revitalization non-matching grant for $10,000. And I am going to be following up on both of these grants, especially the $10,000 grant for downtown. The Electric Cities has an employee whose main job now is to look at federal money for town municipalities. And I will get to know this man very well. And the big news is the Board of Commissioners at that meeting, the board recommended to the Electric City's Board of Directors a 13% reduction that they charge the town of Huntersville. And this will allow the town, if you're Electric City's customer, that you will not have a increase in fiscal year '23. And Madam Mayor, the only thing I can say about Hello Huntersville is that the old jail had 132 visitors, and that's the most we've ever had in a 3-hour period. We sold some T-shirts and we took in a few donations, but I'd like to say a great thanks to Libby Gunther, Kathy Jones, and the people that helped them out for manning that. Thank you. That's my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Boone. Commissioner Kovacs?
I have an update from the Lake Norman Chamber. Wednesday, May 4th, from 6 to 9 is the 9th annual small business event of the year, and it'll be Facebook Live. And also, May 4th, from 6 to 8, Piedmont Plastic Surgery and Dermatology will have an open house here in Huntersville. Lastly, May 6th, from 10 to 11:30, the Small Business Awards Reception Morning Networking event will be at the Lake Norman Chamber office.
Excellent. Commissioner Kidwell?
No report.
That was fast. All right, you win. Fastest report tonight. Commissioner Phillips?
I hate that I've had to do this 2 times. Jessica Marie Bose-Miller of Cornelius, North Carolina, passed away on April 26, 2022, after a long illness. Jessica was born in Statesville, North Carolina on December 24th, 1979, to Rodney and Deborah Dingus of Statesville. Jessica was a loving wife, mother, and daughter. She was an extremely loyal friend and passionate advocate for the ocular melanoma community. Tens of thousands followed Jessica as she openly shared her journey over the last 4 years. Her strong faith and positive outlook never wavered. She was an inspiration to all who knew her. I'm not going to read the whole thing because I'm going to end up sobbing, because she was a mother of 4 kids. I've been elected since 2019. This is the second obituary I have read for a woman under 40 that has died from ocular melanoma in our community. It's not political. It's just a fact that we keep having people in our community die from this cancer, And I hope that people are paying attention, and I hope those in Raleigh are paying attention and will actually get the funding this time, because it's lives. And Jessica, bless her, thank her, God bless her family. She did all she could to try to find out why this cancer was happening in our community. She put herself through testing, and that was time she could have spent with her babies. And instead, she was fighting for our community. And I wanted to honor her and bring this up because if we're sad and we barely knew her or didn't know her at all, I can't imagine what that family's going through. And yes, she lived in Cornelius, but Lake Norman's a community, and I hope that we can all keep them in our prayers and our thoughts, not just now, but for the rest of their lives, because it's Mother's Day coming up, and they're babies who don't have their mom.
That's right. Thank you, Commissioner Phillips. Commissioner Partee?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say thank you to Ms. Kim Strickland, to Michael J. Cox and the Parks Department staff for the outstanding Hello Huntersville program we had on Sunday. I attended with my wife, Michelle, and my family, and we had a great time there. And moving forward, I think Huntersville is going to provide a nice, great service and entertainment to this township. So thank you, both of you. I have no report other than my announcement, as normal, my public service announcement regarding public safety and guns that should be stored. And as you know, the police department has gun safety locks. And I believe that if child safety is very important, and guns kill, guns have no ID, bullets have no ID, they kill. So please, if you need guns, locks, please contact the police department or me. Also, finally, I'm going to bring awareness to the nonprofit organization named Cool Kids Clubhouse in honor of Dan Jensen, located here in Huntersville. Cool Kids Clubhouse mission is devoted to improving the quality of life of pediatric cancer patients. Check out their website and donate. That's it, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Munger?
I'll apologize in advance. I'm going to be a little long-winded tonight. I have a bit of a report to go through. So I want to echo sentiments regarding Hello Huntersville. Yesterday, we had a nice stream of visitors at the Downtown Plan Steering Committee booth. Loved the fact that we were getting a lot of questions, a lot of interaction. It is outstanding when just regular residents come up and say, well, what's going on? And that's what we live for. We want to answer those questions. We want to get the feedback. We want to know what you're thinking, and we want to interact. It's fabulous. I loved it. Quarter one CMS updates. I'm going to go through a number of schools here. Barnett Elementary. Barnett students and staff raised $12,227.76 with the school's recent Kids Heart Challenge event. The money raised benefits the American Heart Association. Students participated in the month-long event in February as part of their physical education classes. Bradley Middle. Students at Bradley participated in a color run to raise funds for the school. The event was hosted by the school PTA, and the funds raised will be designated to support critical initiatives, including teachers' grants, academic enrichment programs, student scholarships, and mental health initiatives in the school's guidance office. Grand Oak Elementary. Grand Oak recently hosted an evening with support from Huntersville Police Department to educate parents on social media platforms and trends among students. Hopewell High School. Hopewell High School officially opened its new Zen Den with a ribbon-cutting ceremony at the end of March. A number of community partners and parent volunteers collaborated to convert an underutilized copier room into a den-like space for students to unwind and decompress. The Zen Den features a space for yoga, study areas, and a meditation zone. I'm still going. Huntersville Elementary. Huntersville Elementary had new sunshade structures installed over spring break. Extensions were added to the area over their carpool circle, and a new canopy was installed over their playground. Long Creek Elementary. Long Creek participated in the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society's LLS Night, Light the Night campaign. The Long Creek community raised $3,501 in its third year partnering with LSS. And also at Long Creek, third grade classes participated in the Number Drummers workshop on March 15th. Students learned about how music and math are integrated, which I fail to understand because I love math and I suck at music. But there's that. So, also wanted to give a shout out to Huntersville's own 9-year-old Autumn Soulsby, who won the drive, chip, and putt title at Augusta just before the Masters in the girls' 7 to 9 6-year-old division. This is a huge success story for anyone, but even more so for a young lady who made her way through the foster care system. It certainly seems like she made her way to the right family. Coming up soon, this Thursday, May 5th, the Huntersville Ordinance Advisory Board will be meeting virtually at 3:30 p.m. And next Wednesday, at May 11th, the Public Arts Commission will be meeting in the atrium at the Discovery Place Kids building across the street at 6:30 p.m. And as always, if you have the opportunity to give, please consider supporting our nonprofits. That is all.
Thank you, Commissioner Munger. Now, before we move on to our next item, which is the discussion of the 23 CIP projects and bond referendum, I would like for us to take a 5-minute break. So it is 20 till 9 now, so at 8:45, we will come back. like to turn it over to you.
There we go, now we are. So the remaining items that we were proposing to talk about tonight was, I know we've talked about the CIP many times, but we were going to kind of see if you had any questions on the CIP. And then the only other thing was, I think on here was bond, potential, talking about bond referendum. But we are fairly crunched on the bond referendum. And I think if you put Jackie on the spot and Patty and probably others on the spot, to probably do a good job to make sure we educate, we got to educate the public. If we want to do some type of video like Carrie, something probably we've never done before, and make sure we got east, west, north, south projects, to sell to the public. We'd probably say, you know what, we're getting so tight on crunch time, we would probably say push it to November 23. Because are you going to be able to tell me the amount right now? Are you going to be able to tell me exactly what projects are in? Are you going to be able to tell me, all those kind of things, we're going to be in crunch. And I think regardless, if we do it right and pick the right projects, educate the citizens, they're voted up or down, no matter when you do it. But we have to do one if we're going to continue these projects, but we can wait to November 23.
So what I hear is that you are recommending for the board to hold off on the bond referendum until 2023 so that we can develop a complete package to present to the citizens.
I think you would be in a better position for the board to have that information. I just think you'd be in a better position to educate the citizens. And you got to work on the wording. You got to pick the amount. I mean, we can tell you amount and we can tell you projects, but you got to be ready to go because we have to get rolling June, and then between June and November, we've got to get all these documents together to educate the citizens.
So is there any opposition to waiting until 2023 from the board? Commissioner Munger?
I do understand wanting to be well-prepared, and I know it would be a bit of a rush. My concern still remains inflation rate with the way it is right now, and limited resources who are able to do these type of projects. It just keeps going up. The price tag keeps going up. And in my head, we did it last time. We kind of ran through the numbers, and $10 million is no joke. In terms of what it could cost us over a year, and that was based on a 0.5% increase in interest rates, which I know the Fed Reserve Board, I believe it is this week, I could be wrong, is looking at doing that 0.5%. Tomorrow, yes, thank you. Doing that 0.5% in one fell swoop, possibly even 3/4. And if we think that's the only interest rate change that's going to occur, the future is going to be very scary for you. Because, I'm looking at a lot of the economic indicators are very similar to where the United States was in the early 80s. And I can point at different numbers. And if people who were around in the early 80s remember the early 80s, what were interest rates? What, 12, 13, 14%? Yeah, so, and the idea that we're now, Fed was going to jump it up to, 3.5, maybe 4. Yeah, we're not done. We're not even close to done. And putting it out for a year, the other thing I worry about is next year, on November 23, because Katz in Mecklenburg County said, oh, let's be really sneaky and put stuff on a ballot year where no one really pays attention. We're going to be competing against those dollars because they should have done the right thing and put it on this year when their offices are in, not when our offices are in. So we're going to be competing against those. And I struggle that people will say, they want 100 million, they want 500 million, they want, heck with all of them. I ain't giving anybody anything. Whereas this year you have a broader electorate and you'll have it's a good time, and it saves us money, and putting it off a year, I understand we'll be better prepared, but being better prepared doesn't mean it's, in my opinion, that it's going to be better received, and it will ultimately cost us money. So that's my
Ms.
opinion.
Huffman, would you like to talk about the interest rates and what you're seeing in regards, I mean, because I heard that you all seem to recommend possibly waiting. Why does that make sense?
The advice I consistently receive from the LGC is don't try to play the market. Go when your projects are ready. And so speculating about the interest rates, I think they're going up. I know they're going up based on Federal Open Market Committee minutes. At what pace will they go up? Finding the sweet spot on trying to control inflation, and will they have to go up, and then will they go up too fast, and then will they come back down? I don't know what interest rates are going to do. It's late. I get to be a little bit punchy, don't I? What you all do for fun is go to Hello Huntersville. Bobby, will you pull up the spreadsheet? I did a spreadsheet today. This is what I do for fun. And so in cell C3, I said if our principal's $50 million, if the change in interest rates, if interest rates go up 50 basis points, column, you're going to pay back the principal over 20 years under either method. The interest difference that you would pay over the 20-year life if interest rates are increased 50 basis points is $2.6 million. I don't have contempt for that at today's tax value. $2.6 million is ballpark 2.5 cents on the tax rate. Over 20 years, I don't know what it's going to be then. Bobby, will you head back up? So if you change cell C3 from 50 million to 80 million, I don't know how much you're going to want to issue, but how much you issue will have an impact on how much that difference in interest is. So if you decide to issue 80 million, the difference in interest you're going to pay over the 20-year life is 4.2 million. Building this spreadsheet is what I do for fun. It's a little out there. I would not recommend, if you go to the voters about 80 million, and based on our CIP, that's not a ridiculous number in my view, I wouldn't issue it all at one time. So it's unrealistic to think it would be exactly 4.2 million, because likely you would issue, you will need to issue, I believe, in FY24. If voters approve bonds in November of '23, that's 5 months into FY24. We have projects that would likely slow down if we didn't issue within 6 months of when voters approve some. There's no right or wrong answer. You don't have to just go to the voters once a decade, but the last time we went to voters was 2012. And we've not gone yet, and it sounds like we might go in might not go in FY22. FY22, we're not going in FY22. You might not go in November of '22. So if it's going to be at least 10 years, I would recommend you make it a big enough number to satisfy your need to haves off of the CIP list. There's no magic bullet that says you can't go in '23 and go back in '25 or '27. I would try to do it less frequently than that, but you go whenever you go back to the voters as frequently as you want to. I wouldn't issue all 80 million. Bobby, I don't think I made this pull. So the cell that you're sitting on right now, what if interest rates don't go up 50 basis points? What if they go up a full point? So will you change that 50 basis points to 1? So if interest rates go up a full point, guess what? It's double the 50 basis points. I did this at a full point and 50 basis points and 75 basis points, and we changed 80 million to 20 million or 25 million or whatever you think you might issue at one time. And we change this as long as you want to stand here and tolerate it. I don't, it's my good time. What's your pleasure?
Is there any other discussion about not moving forward with the manager's recommendation of waiting till 2023? Either way. Either way. Any discussion on this topic of bond referendum? Commissioner Partee.
Yes, I'm going to piggyback on Commissioner Munger's. I'm all for putting the referendum on the ballot for 2022 Because hearing the town manager talk about the 57 projects that we have in the pipeline, the increase in cost for roads and parks and facilities, which is going to occur, I would rather give the voters of Huntersville a chance to let us know whether to pass the bond issue or not, and to put it on the ballot for 2022. I think it's the right thing to do. I think it's a democratic thing to do. Give them that issue, give them that chance.
Anyone else want to weigh in? Where are you? Commissioner Boone?
Thank you. I'm going to weigh in here. This is an important decision, and it's a educational process to educate the citizens firsthand, not only the big scope of the projects, but the projects right there in their neighborhood that they're concerned about. And both of the commissioners who just spoke mentioned how great it was at Hello Huntersville, where they had an opportunity to listen to the public. Well, we don't have too many opportunities to talk to the public face to face. Hello Huntersville is a good example of this. I think the more that we as commissioners can get out in front of this, if we support it, the better it is to succeed. If it fails in 2022, you won't be able to bring this back until 2024, 2025. And as far as how much debt it's going to cost us, as far as the percentage goes, who's not to say that we can't refinance the debt in 10 years if the interest rate goes down? We just refinanced our last debt and came up with $1 million that we put towards the Greenways. So it's, I think 2023 is the direction that I'm going to support. Thank you.
Commissioners, anyone else? Mr. Roberts?
I think the key is, it would be ideal, the more support we have, whether it's 22 or 23, when we go to the public, that is key. So, can we make it happen in 22? Absolutely, staff will make it happen. But board's got to make some quick decisions on these items ASAP. So we will make it happen. But it just, split voting on when we go into the public and whether all of you are going to get behind it, that's a key component too.
I think that is, that it was an important statement that I hope the board heard, because when the board goes to the voters and asks permission and asks if they want these projects done, it's very important that the board's in lockstep, that you've worked through the projects that are going to be funded. You have a pretty sound idea where the dollars are going to be utilized, and that then you can speak with one voice to the voter. I think it does the voters and our citizens a disservice if we put something on the ballot and half the board is in support and half the board isn't. I think the citizenry are going to go, well, which is it? They all voted the board in to make the tough calls, to be fiscally responsible with their dollars, but to get the projects done. And any fighting over them, whatever is put forward to the voters, y'all need to be in lockstep with. You just do. Maybe if it's a 6-0, that's fabulous. If it's a 5-1, but when you get to 3-3, I will tell you now, I am not going to break that tie, because I don't believe that is in the best interest of the community. Commissioner Kovacs.
Talking about being fiscally responsible, while it is nice to see that it's not 10 million, it's less, hopefully. If we know these projects need to get done, I don't know why, if we know we don't have the funding for it, we will have to ask for it, why we wouldn't do it without wasting more money. It's just where my thought, I just can't understand paying more in interest for the same amount of money when we could have avoided that doing sooner.
And I understand that, because how many projects could we have done with that amount of money? Commissioner Kidwell, you have any thoughts? I know you do.
The only thing I would say, whether we do it this year or next year, it doesn't matter. We have to be very precise on what we're going to do with the money. All right? Because I'm not going to roll out there, and whether I support it or not, until, when someone says, why are you asking for whatever amount of money, whether I support it or not, and I say, well, it's for these projects. Well, what happens when those projects are done? Is there a sunset clause on this? How's it going to affect our tax rate? These are a lot of questions that we need answered. And, you talk about the board making a decision. Let's say the board right now says 80 million, but what's that 80 million going to? So if we're seriously going to do it, let's do it, but let's sit down, talk about it, and let's be hard on ourselves. Let's be hard on the projects. Let's look at the scope of projects that are out on the CIP and say, you know what? It's just not going to cut mustard. That's got to go to the bottom of the list, and take the flak for that.
Anthony, I've had before, I don't know if Bobby's got accessible now, I doubt it, and please don't look for it. Bond counsel has given us a calendar before, and I don't remember what resolution the board would need to pass as early as June, and I don't remember if it's the first meeting in June or the second meeting in June, but think about how you got one more meeting before that first meeting in June. And does that give you adequate time, you think, to allow maybe a Parks Commission or the Greenway Commission to weigh in on what their recommendation might be before you'd be passing information? And I invite you to consider this too. Our next revow will be effective in FY '24. So what a penny generates this year, $1,040,000 on the tax rate, is probably not going to be what a penny generates next year. I don't know what that's going to be because the revow's not finished, so those are two other things I'd ask you to think about.
Commissioner Purdy.
Jackie, if the voters approve the bond package, the money is parked there for us to use.
When voters approve debt, they authorize it, but it's unissued until we decide, okay, yeah, I want to issue in March. No, I want to issue in October. So it's available to be issued anytime within 7 years. And you, technically, it's really 10, but yes.
So regardless if it's fiscal year 23, 24, when they vote on 22 and they approve it, the money's parked. So it's available for us to use for projects.
Takes about, after voters approve debt, it takes a minimum of 90 days to enter into the debt market, but you can go in anytime within 7 years.
And then there is the option for the extension.
And the option for the additional 3.
So the money, the funding there.
I think that the key, though, is that we have to be able to communicate to the citizens what those projects are, and we have to be able to communicate to the citizens how much their tax rate could be impacted. So, for example, in 2012, when we went to the voters, we stated in all of the educational material that we put forward, to cash out these bonds has the potential to be up to 5 cents on the tax rate. Now, if memory serves, we actually only, because of growth in our community, we only raised it like 2 1/4.
I think that's right. I got to say, bond counsel will advise you there is a sweet spot about specificity. When we went to the voters in 2012, we said something like public improvement bonds, and those public improvement bonds said something to the effect of could be for 2 fire stations, but could be for other things such as streetscapes. Well, we ended up using those bonds for one of the fire stations, Fire Station number 4, but the rest of those bonds we used for streetscapes and other places. So I understand and I appreciate you want citizens to believe you're going to get this road and that sidewalk and this greenway, but you might want to build in some flexibility too that would allow you to do something else. There's a sweet spot. You just need to be careful because once you ask the question in a specific way, that's when you're married to that question.
And if memory serves, one of the reasons we were not able to capture for 2 stations is because that one station came in at such a higher cost.
Right.
So that's something else this board and staff are going to have to look at in making sure that the dollar amounts that we're assigning are as close as possible to how much they're actually going to cost, because you don't want to put something out there and says it's going to say it's going to be $1.2 million and it come back 5. So, and the longer you kick it down the road, the more likely that will happen. Commissioner Kidwell.
Yeah, Jackie, you said something, and I just want to, and you speak very quickly, because I know you're excited about this type of stuff. But what you said was, when the taxpayers decide to take on more debt, I just want that to be clear, that it is debt we are talking about. Bond is not just free money, it is debt the town is taking on. So for the 6 people that are watching online still, and the 0 people in the audience, it is more debt we are talking about that the town's taking on. And I appreciate you saying that.
The collateral associated with general obligation bonds is the taxing authority of the town. So when voters approve that debt, they're saying, we agree to raise taxes, whatever level necessary to make the repayments on those bonds. And if the board decided they weren't going to approve a tax rate high enough to pay the debt on those bonds, the local government commission will come in and usurp your authority to level the tax and levy one sufficient to pay those bonds. Did you have another statement, Commissioner Munger?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would, one of the things Jackie was kind enough to provide us was the fiscal plan of
The 5-year?
the 5-year financial plan. Play with it. Get in there and dig into it. Because, one of the things I did right here would be 25%, 30%, 35%, and 40% revals. How that affects our fund balance. Because I know one of the things, obviously with debt, there is the always very real possibility that we would have to raise our tax rate. If you play with the reval numbers, you will see that it might be something we can actually postpone. Because I know you put 12% in, love you, not going to be 12%. It's going to be much higher than 12%. And that's why I went with the 25, 30, 35, and 40%. When we had the reval in fiscal year 2020, that was 35%, but that was over a period of 7 years? 8, my apologies. So this one's going to be 4%, but we all know what the real estate market's doing right now. It is insane. 25, 30, 35, 40. It's going to be in that range. Just look at the tea leaves. And realistically, if you look at the end of last year, fiscal year 21 actual, we were at 58 million. At 25%, by fiscal year 27, it would be 46 million. So it would go down $12 million. But if you go any of the other ones, 52 million at 30%, 57.5 million at 35%, and 62.8 million at 40%. There's money there. And to be clear, I set the tax rate 24 all the way across. I changed the one from 22 to 24, so it's 24 all across. Get in there and play with these things. It is so easy just to pop in numbers and get everything to switch around, and you will see a path. It can be done. I encourage you to play with these, and I'm sure Jackie would too.
So, Mr. Roberts, I believe you would like some direction on the bond referendum. Correct.
We have to.
So this board needs to give some direction tonight on whether or not to direct staff to move forward down a path for bonds for this November of 2022 or November of 2023. And I'm sorry that you can't kick that can any longer, but somebody has to make a decision, and we need to be able to move forward so that staff can make sure that they are prepared either way. And you are putting them under the gun. And I admit, I'm one that's very supportive of doing bonds in 2022 because I do see the writing on the wall. Commissioner Phillips?
So staff's telling us that they would like us to pause and do 2023. I'm sitting here counting on my fingers. Do it today, whatever, but that gives them 5, actually more like 4 months if you consider like paper ballot voting.
Well, it gives them till June, the middle of June, somewhere in there.
No, but even after that, we have to do an education process. So between now and October, when early voting starts, really isn't that far apart. Y'all can throw it on there right now, probably not get it passed, let's be real, and then do a shoddy job educating people. If we know that we're gonna do it next year, then that gives you time to start educating people now. Bonds equal debt, debt equals taxes. What would you guys like us to do a bond for? What specific road projects? I would love to hear what they're gonna do on 73, which ties up a lot of our potential money in the budget. I also think that it's important that this board all have had experience reading a budget, digesting a budget, and knowing that we can chop stuff out of here, that we can play with the fees and services. Like I was sitting here during Anthony's thing, what would $2 extra on a vehicle tax do? How much does that generate? What goes up? You add an extra $1 to trash services, which we're already subsidizing. I feel like there's a lot more conversations that need to be had, but if we know that the conversation is still going to end in the same way next year, I feel like we're doing a better service for the community that we're representing, because education is power. Making decisions up here, whatever, but the educational pieces of this, which we have talked about with Carrie and the videos and such, that is critical. And I hate putting staff on the spot and making them do all this stuff so haphazardly, because if it blows up, then they feel like they're responsible for our poor decisions. So if we're going to do it, let's do it right.
I gotta say this, it's Apex video, it's not Carrie. I'm sure Carrie's got a good one too, but Apex is the one that.
Maybe that was me.
Apex is the video, all right. So Commissioner Boone?
Thank you. Mr. Roberts, have you ever been working in a town where you had a referendum that failed?
No.
Okay. I'm just saying that we've got a long way to go on this and a short time to do it, and I'm going to be pushing for 23.
Commissioner Kovacs?
I don't doubt staff at all, but do you feel that you could, if we gave you direction to do it this year, that you could get it done appropriately?
We will get it done. The key is you all will have to get in a room. And sometimes, this is not to be negative, coordinating calendars is tough. We have to have your feedback. What is the amount? What is the wording? What is the project? Now, we can put all that together and give you guidance and help you, but we will achieve the November 22 date if that's what you tell us to do. It's just, I've got to have your calendars to make it happen.
What's the official date that the language and everything must be prepared and turned in?
Sorry, Jack.
We have to adopt a resolution, I think, early June, and then there's certain dates we've got to
Date in
get to.
June, that's the first resolution, and my recollection is the last thing for the board to do. Think about exactly as Commissioner Phillips pointed out, early voting. I'm pretty sure there's information we got to get to the Board of Election. Our drop dead date is August.
Here's the problem that I'm seeing, is staff can get it done. Staff couldn't get it done for the November 22. The question is, can the board? At the end of the day, that's the question. I have no doubt in staff's capability. Commissioner Kovacs?
I'm going to not go back on what I said, because I don't like the idea of spending money that we shouldn't have to, but your question was, can we, as a board, get it done in time? And we're not getting it done here right now, so that's worrying me if we can get it done in time for the ballot. I'm just,
Yes. Yes. Anyone else? So what would this board like to do? Like to do a straw poll? 2022? Got 2 for 2022. 2023? So we've now, all right, so there's your direction, 2020, Commissioner Munger.
And I just want to be clear, if we do it 2023, I will be the biggest cheerleader regardless. This has to happen. I just wanted it to happen sooner.
Well,
So,
and
yeah.
with the 23, now that we know that this is going to happen, it's important for all of us who just said 23 to actually stay to 23 and not kick it to 24. So I would like staff possibly to go ahead, I don't know who needs to do it. Do we need a little bond group? I don't know, but we need to make a time frame and a calendar. That way, when it's time to do it, we have the projects, we've done more than the legal limit of educational programs, but we've actually went into the communities, we've canvassed. I don't want to be up against the county or the schools. I think what they're doing is absolute trash and trashy. But it doesn't mean that Huntersville's going to fail because they did something shaky. And I think that now that we have a grassroots plan, we stick to it and we stay to our word.
And I would venture to say that, Mr. Roberts, we will have a variety of workshops specific to the bond referendum, where that's all we discuss, to work through the projects to come to a dollar amount that this board agrees to.
Yes, we will have a schedule moving forward that we will make sure allow time to get it out of you.
To get not only out of the board, but to also then turn
Education.
around and educate the citizenry.
Absolutely.
All right. I know that we had the CIP discussion on the table, but it is almost 9:30. Would we like to, is anybody interested in moving this to a workshop for the CIP discussion?
I would like to move CIP to a workshop and that would be next week, no later than next week. And also in the process, let's have an update on our legislative policies as that will go into effect. Third week in May, they start convening.
Yes,
So knock both out in one day.
I would suggest 4 o'clock on Wednesday,
This Wednesday?
next Wednesday.
I would say everyone needs to look at their calendars before we do that.
We'll give you something to start with.
We will send out a doodle poll for next week and see if we can get everybody lined up.
Yeah.
We'll send one out tomorrow.
I got things already.
And you did say next week, right?
They said next week.
We'll send one out tomorrow with various times and dates, et cetera.
What's the earliest we could do one this week? Janet?
Thursday or Friday.
Thursday or Friday?
I'm out of town.
I'm gone too. So do the doodle poll. I don't know that this week or next week will work, but we will get it done.
This week is good for you and next week is bad? Okay.
All right, so doodle poll will go out. All right, is there a motion to adjourn? Motion adjourned. Second?